Chapter 381. Zhang Yan flew out of the main hall and sped along the corridors. The three devils chased after him. When he reached the outside of the side hall, there was no one else here. He suddenly turned around and tossed the star's sword pellet into the air. The sword lights swept past and slashed the three devils. However, they couldn't slash them apart like Kong Tong did. They could only go in by half a foot and couldn't go any deeper. Zhang Yan thought to himself, Kong Tong learned one of the Shaoqing's three lineages killing sword art. His sword is extremely sharp, and there's nothing it can't slash when it flies out. My sword pellet hasn't been nurtured by a secret technique, so it can't be compared to his. However, he had many methods to deal with this devil, so he wasn't dejected at all. With a loud shout, he released his pill baleful chi and pushed two of the devils to the side. The smoke was either hard or soft, it kept on splitting and gathering, giving rise to endless profound changes. No matter how hard they screamed and struggled, they couldn't squeeze in. Only the devil in the middle was allowed to do as he pleased, so there was no hindrance. Therefore, he was able to find an opening to sneak in. This was exactly what Zhang Yan wanted him to do. He looked up and saw that the devil's face was full of evil, cruel and brutal, but he was not in a hurry. He formed a spell and the yellow hand flew out from the top of his head and grabbed down, capturing him in a split second. He activated his mysterious technique and clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. How could the devil possibly withstand it? In a split second, the black smoke dispersed and the devil was smashed into pieces. However, Zhang Yan still felt that it wasn't enough. He tossed out the star's sword pellet and pointed with his hand, splitting the sword lights into 16 sword lights. It spun non-stop, slicing at the broken body. In the span of a few breaths, he had continuously attacked with hundreds and thousands of sword strikes. Relying on the vigorous aura of his core, he didn't need to worry about running out of energy. The sword light danced non-stop until the demon was cut into pieces. Only when it was about to fade away did he shake his sleeve and deflect the sword light. Although the demonic chi was cut into pieces, but in the blink of an eye, as if they had received some kind of command, the sound of howling winds could be heard. The tens of thousands of strands once again gathered in the center, as if they were about to take shape again. At this point, how could Zhang Yan possibly let it go so easily? He called out to the 9 absorption devil slip in his heart. Just now the idea arose, only to hear the clear sound rising in spirals. A jade slip flew into the air, and without any warning, it automatically rolled into the boiling devil chi. As soon as the jade slip entered it, it was like a fish in water, and it emitted extremely delighted sounds. The devilish chi that covered the sky was first thrown into chaos. Then, as if they were worshipping, they all looked towards Jian. At first, when this magic slip absorbed the demonic chi, it was quite elegant, as if it was spinning silk from a cocoon, absorbing it bit by bit. However, it was like a whale swallowing the sea, taking the initiative to leap out. Everywhere it passed, the demonic chi was swept up, and its eating behavior was extremely ugly. Seeing that it was enjoying itself, Zhang Yan didn't bother with it. He turned his attention to the other two. These two creatures still didn't know life from death and wanted to attack the inner circle. However, they couldn't find a way in and continued to hover outside, crashing around randomly. He couldn't help but smile. He withdrew some of his magic power and let another one in. The one on the left was the first to be freed, and it let out a dry howl. Then, he rushed down the wall. This time, Zhang Yan didn't need the Xian Huan big hand to call. Instead, the essence chi in his abdomen swelled up and gathered his strength and mana. Aiming at the demon's face, he threw a punch. There was a sudden explosion in the air. Where the punch landed, there was a roar, as if it had collapsed. A small part of the demon's body was blasted into smoke that filled the sky. He shouted, waving his fists repeatedly, and explosions rang out in the air. In just a moment, the demon was smashed into pieces. As it was pushed out by his energy, this ball of demonic chi was like a drop of ink in water, spreading out layer by layer, but it couldn't close up. This demon wasn't actually very powerful, but it was invincible, and it could nourish itself by sucking blood and flesh. However, if there was a way to stop it from gathering, then it wouldn't be a problem. There was no need for Zhang Yan to utilize the revival technique. The devil slip had sensed it and flew over in an instant, and then it shook lightly before emanating a boundless suction force out of thin air. It was like a whale sucking in water, and it completely swallowed all the devil qi. Zhang Yan couldn't help but laugh, and said, "Good treasure." Having received praise, the 9 subduing magic slip also responded, and let out a cry of joy. Zhang Yan instantly noticed that a strand of happiness had suddenly arisen in his heart, and he knew that it was coming from the devil slip. His expression couldn't help but change slightly. As the jade slip absorbed more and more spiritual qi, it became more and more spiritual. He didn't even dare to think about nurturing a magic weapon. Even the people of the heavens abode had to rely on various opportunities to be lucky to be able to do it. However, when this magic slip was in his hand, it had already given birth to a true consciousness, and now it was growing stronger and stronger. If it continued to absorb like this, would it slowly give birth to a true spirit? This thought flashed in his mind, and he immediately shook his head. There was no need to think about this right now. After calming his mind, he withdrew the pill evil qi on the right side, and let the last demon in. The demon let out a shrill cry, and couldn't wait to fly towards Zhang Yan, biting fiercely. However, halfway through, a watercolored brilliance flashed, and it collided with a group of 6-winged bloodline gold worms that reeked of blood. Although the two were both demons, it was as if they had encountered a mortal enemy, and they desperately bit each other. This bloodline gold worm had been locked up by Zhang Yan for many days, and it was already crazy with hunger. At this time, seeing this group of rich devil qi, how could it be willing to let it go? Naturally, it didn't care and started biting. The two were like mad dogs biting each other for a long time. In the end, the bloodline gold worm won in quantity, and it was flexible and cunning, finally suppressing the demon. But at the same time, Zhang Yan also noticed that as the bloodline gold worm gnawed more and more devil qi, they seemed to be attacked by the devil qi. One by one, they fell to the dust, and soon, a shallow pile was formed on the ground. In the end, only one worm was left hovering there. Although its body was several times larger than before, it was slow and sluggish, and no longer as agile as before. As for the demon, compared to before, it had also shrunk a whole circle, and was less ferocious. Obviously, this was a situation where both sides lost. Zhang Yan didn't want to wait any longer. The water element true light was released, and the worm was collected. Then, he drove the black-yellow hand to grab down, and the demon was crushed. The 9 captivating demon slip rolled up, and like a whirlwind, it was cleaned up. After taking care of the 3 demons, he summoned the 9 captivating demon slip into his hand. According to the 4th layer of the divine contract, there was a steady stream of essence qi flowing into his body. After a while, he stood up in high spirits. The 2 black eyes flickered with a bright light, as if they were plated with a layer of glaze. Just now, it disappeared. He couldn't help but secretly nod. The essence qi obtained from the demon's body was indeed very compatible with the devil arts. Its effect was also far better than absorbing the flesh and blood of the cultivators of the celestial sect. It was just 3 demons, but the mass of essence qi under his abdomen was a lot more abundant. Even his own origin spirit could feel it constantly growing. Feeling this benefit, he thought of the hundreds of demons in the hall. His heart slightly warmed, he waved his sleeves, and went back into the hall. In this short period of time, the original hundreds of disciples in the hall had been eaten down to more than 30 people. They also knew that they couldn't fight against these demons alone, and they didn't dare to casually fly in the air. So, with their backs against each other, they each released their magical treasures and tools, and formed a formation to resist the enemy. After Zhang Yan entered the hall, he looked around, but he was not optimistic about the fate of these disciples. He had already noticed it just now. These demons seemed to have the ability to pollute the magic tools. He couldn't see any clues in a short period of time, but by the time he discovered it, it would already be too late. Just now, he had eliminated the 3 demons, afraid that the other party would notice something, so he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Secretly on guard, he carefully looked at the side, and if he found something wrong, he would immediately stop. However, as he investigated, he unexpectedly discovered a few abnormalities. It turned out that those demons weren't completely mindless. Among them, there were 3 leaders who had a cunning look on their faces, and they were all surrounding Kong Tong and Fang Zhenlu. Zuomo and the others with the strongest battle strength were next to them, tightly entangling them, making it impossible for them to escape. As for the demons, who only relied on their instincts, they surrounded the remaining disciples. At the same time, he also found that there was something wrong with a young cultivator. The weapon in his hand wasn't a powerful magic treasure, it was just an ordinary magic sword, but he could rely on his own strength to resist the attacks of several demons. However, those demons would suddenly move up and down, and when they touched, they would immediately leave. It looked like they were fighting fiercely, but it wasn't like that at all. This person's expression seemed to be straining, but in reality, he was very relaxed, and he even looked around from time to time. After looking a few more times, Zhang Yan was sure that even if this person wasn't Zhang Boyan's soul clone, he was definitely a disciple of the devil sect. Such a big flaw should have been discovered a long time ago, but at this moment, everyone was in a dangerous situation and only cared about themselves. Even Fang Zhenlu was surrounded and had no time to care about anything else, so how could he have noticed this person? Zhang Yan didn't provoke this person, and only remembered this person's appearance in his heart. After waiting for a long time, he was sure that the old devil hadn't noticed him absorbing the devil heads, so he didn't hesitate any longer. He waved his sleeve and immediately sent out a wisp of Dan Sha, stirring up the devil heads. Then, he rode a cloud of smoke and returned to the side hall. This action immediately attracted 5 demons in one breath, and they all chased after him. He couldn't help but secretly say, "Good." He flew outside, and after arriving at the side hall, he stopped and turned around. Seeing that these demons were also following him like shadows, whistling through the air, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of a sneer. He once again summoned the Xianhuang hand and grabbed down. With the previous action, he was already familiar with how to deal with these demons. In less than the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, this demon was cleaned up, and became the essence to nourish the magic slip. Then, without stopping, he once again rushed into the main hall. This avatar of Zhang Boyan, Yuanying, could split out 108 demons. Although a few of them had been secretly taken by Zhang Yan, they had also swallowed a lot of flesh and blood into his body. He only thought that they were killed by the disciples of the celestial sect, so he didn't care at all. In a flash, several more demons flashed out, filling up the 108 demons. This was an advantage for Zhang Yan. After entering the hall again, he did the same thing and lured a few more demons out into the side hall. After a few times, he killed no less than 20 demons in a row. This action was equivalent to spitting out the blood essence that Zhang Boyan's Yuanying avatar had just swallowed. One of the demons with sharp eyes finally sensed that something was wrong. It flew into the air, and its lantern-like eyes emitted a cold light. It scanned left and right, as if it wanted to find the person who caused it to suffer a loss. Chapter 382. When Zhang Yan saw that his actions had attracted the attention of the devil, he decided that there was no need for him to stick his head out. Thus, he stopped moving and carefully retreated a few steps. From his sleeve, he took out a 3-foot-long magic sword that was as cold as a pool of clear water. He performed an incantation gesture and tossed it into the air. It soared into the clouds and instantly clashed with the 3 devils that were coming at him. To avoid attracting too much attention, he chose a direction and retreated toward the place where everyone was gathered in the hall. He controlled the flying sword and turned it into a sword rainbow that circled around to block the devils. However, after a few exchanges, he was surrounded by danger. If others saw this, they would definitely break out in a cold sweat for him. In fact, he was afraid that the devil would see through him, so he deliberately made it look like he was in extreme danger. Due to the invasion of the devil Qi, the hall was already shrouded in black fog. The disciples could barely distinguish the people around them, but even so, they still had to guard against the devil's tricks. Therefore, they didn't dare to gather too much. The remaining 30 people were divided into 4 familiar circles, each defending against the devil's attack. One of the cultivators sensed that Zhang Yan was approaching and immediately became vigilant. Although he couldn't clearly see who it was, he loudly said, "Open a gap for this fellow Taoist. Let him come in and fight the enemy together." This person wasn't saying this out of pure kindness. Rather, after fighting for so long, the weaker cultivators had already been killed by the devils. Those who could last for so long were not easy to deal with. Helping Zhang Yan was the same as helping himself. However, there were a few cultivators who weren't at ease. They were afraid that this was a trick played by the old devil. When they looked over, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. So it's fellow Taoist Xian Yuanzi. No wonder, no wonder. Everyone, quickly open a path for fellow Taoist. After seeing Zhang Yan's appearance clearly, not only were their suspicions dispelled, but they also began to urge him. The reason was simple. Zhang Yan had just been fighting with Kang Tong. When Fang Zhenlu and the others controlled the sword formation together, they had already displayed an extraordinary cultivation that was far above everyone else. With their help, their chances of survival had increased greatly. Zhang Yan smiled and thanked him. Then, he took a step back and squeezed his way in. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the others. The devil circled around a few times, but couldn't find the culprit. Only then did he completely give up. He fell back down, as if he wanted to vent his anger, and let out a roar. He let out a roar, causing the devils to surge forward like a heavy wave. However, the remaining cultivators were all hard to deal with, and they also helped each other out, so they were able to hold their ground. Although the attacks were like a tide, after a while, no one was killed. Noticing this situation, the leading demon let out a shrill howl, and the other demons responded one after another. They opened their bloody mouths and started biting each other madly. At first, those cultivators didn't understand what he meant, but in the blink of an eye, the number of devils suddenly increased to 36. Originally, they only looked like ferocious heads, but after this transformation, they even grew arms and legs. Devilish flames burned on their bodies, and they all roared at the sky. Everyone felt dizzy as they listened. Not only did that ferocious aura not decrease in the slightest, it even increased. Many cultivators immediately felt that something was wrong. When it rains, it pours. At this moment, a cry of surprise came from one of the battlefields. It turned out that the magical instrument that was flying in the air to defend against the enemy had suddenly become dull and lifeless. It had lost all its spirituality and had fallen to the ground. Originally, those cultivators had been on high alert. However, the moment the hole was opened, the cultivators behind them were exposed. Everyone was caught off guard and nearly half of the cultivators swarmed forward. In just a flash, they had torn apart the cultivators' bodies and devoured them. The rest of the people were shocked when they saw such a tragic scene. Seeing this, Fang Zhenlu hurriedly warned, "Fellow Taoists, this devil Qi can contaminate magic treasures, please be careful." However, even though they knew this, they didn't have a good way to deal with it. Most of them were only able to hold on until now because they had obtained a few magic treasures from the Yaoyin clan's pagoda. After a few breaths of time, another cultivator suddenly cried out in panic, but after a moment, there was no more sound. At this moment, the devil Qi in the hall became thicker and thicker, covering the top and the ground. Shadows flickered, bewitching the soul and bewitching the heart. Everyone felt increasingly uneasy. At this moment, someone shouted, "Everyone, now that things have come to this, it's more important to preserve our lives. There's no need to worry about some ceiling formation. Only by asking Taoist Yu to protect us can we escape this calamity." When Zuomo from Yuxiao School heard this, he immediately said loudly, "I will open a path for you fellow Taoists. Everyone already had this thought in their hearts, but they were currently being held back by the devils. They were simply powerless. Now that they heard that someone was willing to open a path, they were all overjoyed. Zhuemo pointed at the star shuttle in the air, and it immediately released rays of bright starlight. The starlight spun around and forced the devils around him to take a few steps back. Immediately after, he took out a 5-inch long red candle from his sleeve. He pinched it between 2 fingers and straightened the wick. He muttered an incantation and took a step forward. With a shout, the red candle ignited without any fire. It shone brightly in the dark room. He removed his hand and said, "Go." The object turned into a bright red flame and flew away. In an instant, it dispersed the fog and cleared a path about 6 feet wide. When they were illuminated by the red light, the 36 devils seemed to be afraid. They paused for a moment and retreated a bit. Taking advantage of this gap, Zhuemo took the lead and flew into the hall. When everyone saw this, they also flew in. Zhang Yan still had the leisure to observe his surroundings. He looked around and found the cultivator that he suspected was the old devil's host body. Now that he saw the light, he could see an almost imperceptible look of pride on his face. His heart couldn't help but move, but he didn't have time to think about it right now. He got up and followed the others. At this moment, in the outer hall, Su Gongyuan and the Eagle Girl were fighting fiercely. However, although Su Gongyuan had the jade mirror given to him by Zhang Boyan, he was only able to hold his opponent back. His attacks weren't fierce at all. He also had his own little calculations in his heart. Although Zhang Boyan was powerful, he was too arrogant to fight against 2 enlightened masters. He didn't think he could win, so he held back. He didn't want to be injured. If this person was defeated, he wouldn't even have a chance to escape. The red scarf in the Eagle Girl's hand was a profound artifact. It was powerful, but it had a flaw. It had to be held in one's hand and couldn't be used once it was far away. Every time she wanted to use it to subdue Su Gongyuan, the latter would be extremely slippery and hide in another place. When she was about to enter the hall, this person came up to her again, so she was helpless and was stuck here. On the plaza outside the hall, the 2 Yuanying perfected masters were locked in a fierce battle. Zhang Boyan seemed to be in a hurry to take down Ying Qinglin. In one breath, he took out 3 or 4 transcendent artifacts. The entire sky was filled with light. Ying Qinglin was taken aback by her actions. He had always been a cautious person, and now he was even more vigilant. He did not seek to be meritorious, but to not make any mistakes. He only guarded the door so that wind and rain could not penetrate it. Although the demonic flames were agitated and flying, eager to devour people, they could not break in. The battle fell into a stalemate. The thin-bearded Taoist was guarding the door on the wall, and when he saw everyone flying towards him, he was stunned. He stretched out his hand and said in a frightened voice, "Everyone, you mustn't go any further. My senior brother is in the middle of refining the ceiling formation. He can't be disturbed at all." After everyone landed, Zhuemo was the first to come out. He flicked his sleeves and said unhappily, "Taoist priest Hua, don't say such words. The ceiling formation can't be broken right now, but we can think of another way in the future. However, we only have one life. Don't worry. We also know the severity of the matter. Even if Taoist Master Yu's cultivation is damaged, I can beg the sect to make some compensation for you." Fang Zhenlu also said, "Taoist priest Hua, we disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders are originally of the same branch. If the Taoist Master knew that our lives were in danger, he would definitely not stand by and do nothing. You can't make the decision on this matter. Just go in and report and see what the Taoist Master has to say." Up until now, everyone had suffered heavy casualties. As a Taoist master of Yuanying, how could Yuji not be aware of the situation outside? He was just pretending to be deaf and mute. Everyone was well aware of this. However, no one dared to say it out loud when they asked for his protection. They could only pretend that he really didn't know. At this moment, the originally bright red candlelight suddenly extinguished, and the surroundings fell into darkness once again. Howling sounds could be heard outside the hall. The remnant wind and dark clouds were endless. It was obvious that the devil was no longer restrained and was charging over again. Everyone became even more flustered. Zhuemo said fiercely, "Taoist priest Hua, if you don't let us in, don't blame us for forcing our way in." The thin-bearded cultivator replied unyieldingly, "Senior brother is currently using our sect's secret technique. No matter what, you can't go in." While they were arguing, a calm voice came from inside. "Junior brother, let them in." When the thin-bearded cultivator heard this, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Although he insisted on stopping them, he also knew that if the devil caught up, he would be powerless against everyone. He immediately turned his body and opened up a path. The remaining dozen or so cultivators also relaxed and impatiently rushed in. Zhang Yan was brought to the inner hall by the crowd. He looked up and saw Yu Yuji sitting cross-legged on the ground. In his hand, there was a ball of fire that was as cold as the moon. It was green and was burning the ceiling formation. Seeing that everyone had rushed in, he frowned and threw out a pearl covered in icy mist. He said in a deep voice, "With this treasure, you can resist a bit, but don't come within 30 feet of it. Otherwise, don't blame I for being ruthless." The thin-bearded cultivator quickly caught it and held it in his palm. Then, he turned around and performed an incantation gesture, tossing the bead into the air. In an instant, a layer of fine light appeared and enveloped everything within a 50-foot radius. The devils were rushing over, crossing hundreds of feet in an instant. When they reached the light, it was as if they had hit a flexible wall of water. The deeper they went, the more difficult it became. In just a moment, they were all pushed out. They tried several times in a row, but it was the same. As if they knew that they couldn't do anything, the devils suddenly gathered in the middle, revealing the Yuanian clone. He clasped his hands behind his back and laughed loudly. "Fellow Yu, I came here today to settle the grudge between me and Ing Qinglin. I don't want to make things difficult for you, so I'll give you some face. As long as you don't interfere, I won't make things difficult for you." After saying that, he flicked his sleeve and walked out. When everyone saw that the old devil's clone had left, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. However, they were all experienced people, so they didn't really believe that the old devil would let them go. All of them took out pills and consumed them, seizing the time to meditate. Zhang Yan also sat down in a corner. He looked at the golden ceiling formation in the middle and saw that it was a bit weaker than before. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes. It was obvious that Yu Yuji had sped up the refining speed when he saw everyone enter. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before he could break the ceiling formation. Chapter 383. Just as Ing Qinglin and Zhang Boyan were in a stalemate, Yu Yuji was sitting cross-legged in the hall. His eyes were bright and a jade flame was burning on the tip of his finger, invading the restriction. The golden light of the ceiling formation suddenly rippled, layer by layer. After a long while, it suddenly trembled. Anyone could tell that the ceiling formation could collapse at any time. The cultivators hiding in the surroundings couldn't help but open their eyes to look over. A few cultivators even leaned forward, wanting to see what was so special about the 5 inherited artifacts of the Yaoyin clan. At this moment, Yu Yuji's eyes opened wide and he suddenly increased the power of his energy. The flames suddenly jumped and became even more vigorous. The thin-eyebrowed cultivator's expression became nervous. It was as if this was the time to be extra vigilant. He held the pearl in his hand and stood at the entrance of the painting wall vigilantly. He didn't dare to relax at all. From time to time, he would sweep his gaze across the faces of the crowd, and from time to time, he would turn his head to look outside. Sweat appeared on Yu Yuji's temples. In the eyes of an outsider, he was melting away the layers of the seal and was about to succeed. However, he knew that the restrictive power contained in the ceiling formation hadn't actually been dissolved by him. Instead, it was retreating and accumulating. As time passed, the power of the ceiling formation became stronger and stronger, and there was even a faint pressure coming from it. Only now did he understand the true power of the ceiling formation. It was as if a brilliant opponent knew that they couldn't fight him head-on, so they kept throwing bait to lure him in step by step, causing him to continuously consume his vitality. In the end, they gathered all their strength to fight him to the death. At this moment, if he gave up, the ceiling formation would definitely return the favor 1,000 times over. Not only would all his previous efforts be wasted, he would also be heavily injured. He would also be severely injured, so he could only break through this restriction with all his strength. However, he had consumed a lot of vitality. If he continued, it would be no less than a battle with a cultivator of the same generation. The current situation could be said to be extremely dangerous. If an enemy attacked, he wouldn't be able to defend at all. The Inata temple was proficient in all kinds of demon ceiling formations. While he was secretly cursing the person who set up the ceiling formation, he couldn't help but admire them. However, the more it was so. His face showed a relaxed expression. Under the fierce suppression of the fire in his hand, the golden light of the ceiling formation was like a candle in the wind, flickering. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the golden light shuddered and showed signs of collapsing. Just as it was about to break, the golden light trembled. Suddenly, a mournful howl came from outside. The old devil's Yuaniing avatar that had just now retreated rushed in like a whirlwind. The thin-bearded cultivator was shocked and hurriedly activated the pearl in his hand, causing it to emit a bright light. It extended outwards, illuminating the area 50 feet in front of the wall. However, the nascent soul Dharma body turned a blind eye to it and rammed into it without stopping. The Dharma treasure that was quite effective against the devils let out a loud rumble when it collided with the Dharma body. The light actually dimmed a little. The thin-bearded cultivator felt a tightness in his chest. Before he could catch his breath, the Yuaniing doppelganger charged forward again. At this critical juncture, Yu Yuji's expression was especially focused, as if he didn't hear what was happening around him. The fire in his hand and the restriction kept trembling. It was obvious that the two sides had reached the final moment. After a few breaths of time, everyone in the inner hall heard a thunderous roar, and the hall seemed to shake. The dust on the ceiling rustled and fell. The ceiling formation had already turned into specks of golden light and dissipated. Yu Yuji let out a muffled groan. He took a few steps back and blood could be seen at the corner of his mouth. The 5 legacy magic tools buzzed and flew into the air, suddenly releasing rays of golden light. As for the well down below, it was no longer suppressed, and with a crack, a small crack appeared on its cover. Yu Yuji's eyes were fixed on it and he moved forward to collect it. However, at this moment, there was a loud rumble and the pearl's brilliance shattered. The thin-bearded cultivator vomited blood and was sent flying. A gust of chilly wind swept in and there was a green scale flame around him. 2 disciples couldn't dodge in time and were immediately turned into ashes. When the dozen or so cultivators hiding in the hall saw how fierce he was, how could they be willing to go forward and fight him? They all retreated. After the Yuaniing doppelganger rushed in, it didn't pay any attention to the others and pounced toward the 5 Dharma treasures. It looked like it wanted to take advantage of the situation and pull them into its embrace. When Yu Yuji saw this, how could he let it do as it pleased? He sneered and said, "I knew you wouldn't change your demonic nature and couldn't hold back." His shoulder trembled and a scripture suddenly flew out from the top of his head. With a crash, the scripture opened and closed, and the boundless demonic might of the Yuaniing doppelganger was actually wrapped up by it. He pointed down again and the doppelganger couldn't help but fall down. In the blink of an eye, it was suppressed to the ground and couldn't move. Yu Yuji was already on the verge of vomiting blood from the backlash of the ceiling formation. However, he forcefully endured the discomfort in his heart and flipped his wrist to take out a horsetail whisk. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he prepared to flick it. As long as he killed the Yuaniing doppelganger on the spot, he would be able to obtain the 5 Dharma treasures without any obstruction. As for Zhang Boyan's main body, he was currently being held back by Qinglin and couldn't come here at all. How could the Yuanying doppelganger be willing to give up? Although he was suppressed by the scripture, he could still move his hands and feet. He stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. A gust of chilly winds suddenly swept up two cultivators who were caught off guard and threw them forward. Yu Yuji only treated it as a final struggle. With a cold snort, he lightly waved his hand and moved one disciple away. Just as he was about to move the second disciple away, the terrified expression on that disciple's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced with a strange smile. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. However, the two of them were extremely close, and it was already too late for him to do anything. The disciple's body suddenly trembled and a Yuanying that was as black as ink leaped out from the top of the door. This Yuanying stretched out his hand and a talisman appeared. He slapped his palm onto Yu Yuji's forehead. The latter's body trembled and the Yuanying that had just emerged from the top of the door was pressed back down again. Following that, the Yuanying came up and hugged him, desperately absorbing all the blood in his body. Yu Yuji desperately circulated his cultivation technique to resist. His face was filled with shock and anger, and his eyes revealed a look of disbelief as he said, "Zhang Boyan? Why are you here? Weren't you entangled with that Daoren?" Zhang Boyan activated his magic power as he laughed loudly and said, "You don't know the profoundness of my 3-in undying body." The 3-in undying body was a divine ability of the Devil Dao. It was extremely difficult to cultivate. One needed to capture 3 Yuanying and refine them before one could master it. Those who cultivated this technique could abandon their bodies if they were in a life or death situation. They could transfer all of their cultivation to the avatar that was thousands of miles away and thus avoid calamities. This was called undying. Because this technique could only be used 3 times in a person's life, it could be used to avoid 3 calamities. Therefore, it was named 3-in. And the reason Zhang Boyan used this divine ability here was not to avoid calamities, but to kill Yu Yuji in one fell swoop and then seize the 5 inherited artifacts of ancestor Taiheng. Previously, his avatar was mixed in with the crowd to investigate the situation here. However, he accidentally discovered that Yu Yuji and Ing Qinglin were not on the same page, so he came up with a plan. He came up with a plan to take them down one by one. First, he boldly charged up the mountain and declared that he would settle his grudge with Ing Qinglin. Then, he took out 4 magic treasures at once to create the effect of making a ruckus. He had a good grasp of people's hearts and Ing Qinglin's temper. He knew that Yu Yuji was a cautious person. Now that he was about to reincarnate, no blood energy dared to attack him. His bluff would definitely make Yu Yuji even more cautious. As expected, Ing Qinglin did not dare to act rashly. He only focused on defense. And Yu Yuji wanted nothing more than for the two of them to fight to the death and hide inside, refusing to come out. Then, he could boldly refine the ceiling formation. Then, Zhang Boyan ordered his avatar to incite the cultivators to charge into the ceiling formation. He hid on the side and waited for Yu Yuji to refine the ceiling formation. Then, he first used the Yuanying avatar to attack him head-on. After attracting his attention, he decisively used the 3-in undying divine ability and transferred all of his cultivation to the avatar. Then, he launched a surprise attack, and sure enough, he succeeded in one fell swoop. His actions were also very daring. If he was seen through, he would definitely be surrounded and attacked by the 2 spiritual masters. However, he had indeed successfully deceived his opponent. Even now, Ing Qinglin still did not know about it. He still thought that the person he was fighting with was the real deal. However, he did not expect that Zhang Boyan would only leave a shadow to confront him, while he himself was already attacking Yu Yuji with all his might. At this moment, although Zhang Boyan had restrained Yu Yuji, he was still unable to take him down for a short period of time. Feeling the boundless power in his body that was about to burst out, Yuanying could not help but feel regret in his heart. He thought to himself that if he did not covet the other party's blood essence and directly killed him, how could this person have the strength to resist? Yu Yuji felt that the essence in his body was slowly flowing away, and knew that he could not continue like this. He said, "The old devil is being held back by I, and can't move at this moment. Fellow Taoists, hurry up and attack. Kill this fellow. Zhang Boyan's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became anxious. Kong Tong was the first to react. He shot out the sword pill in his hand, and a sword light slashed down. If this sword technique were to directly slash down, even if Zhang Boyan was not afraid, it would be enough to make Yu Yuji gasp for breath. At that time, it would be wonderful. He was indeed worthy of being a famous devil. In this moment of crisis, he did not panic in the slightest. With a heh sound, he activated the 3-in undying technique, and his entire body suddenly disappeared. His cultivation was transferred to the Yuanying clone. After that, he mustered all his strength and shook off the scripture on his body. He leaped up from the ground and pounced towards Yu Yuji once again. Yu Yuji's body relaxed, but Kong Tong's sword light had just been unleashed with all his might. Now that he had suddenly lost his target, he was unable to change his direction and slash towards him. Seeing this, Yu Yuji did not have time to do anything else. He hurriedly blew out a mouthful of clear air and deflected the sword light to the side. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zhang Boyan once again rushed in front of him. It seemed like he wanted to use the same trick again. How could Yu Yuji allow him to succeed again? He waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and swept it over. If Zhang Boyan did not change his stance, both sides would definitely be injured. But at this time, Zhang Boyan's eyes burst out with an ominous glint. He secretly used a technique and once again activated the 3-in undying technique. In the next moment, he once again turned to the soul clone. He could not wait to escape from Yuanying, and with a loud bang, the body exploded. He pounced forward and attacked together with the Yuanying clone. Yu Yuji had never expected such a change. His eyes revealed a look of panic, and his hands immediately stopped moving. How could Zhang Boyan be courteous to him? He reached out and hugged him, sucking his blood essence with all his might. Following that, the Yuanying clone turned into a wisp of smoke and drilled into the space between his eyebrows, drilling into his sea of consciousness with all his might. Yu Yuji lost the opportunity in one move and lost everything. He immediately froze on the spot. In an instant, the situation was reversed. Zhang Boyan had already stabilized the situation after 3 changes in his divine ability. This battle could be said to be a complete victory. Even the 5 inherited treasures of the Yaoyin clan would fall into his hands later. After obtaining the treasures, he would be able to deal with Ying Qinglin. Thinking of this, he could not help but laugh wildly. However, he did not notice that at this moment, the manhole cover had lost the suppression of the 5 treasures. A wisp of smoke came out from the gap and turned into a faint figure that walked into Yu Yuji's body. Zhang Boyan's body suddenly trembled, and his laughter came to an abrupt stop. He quickly retreated with a face full of fear. Just now, he realized that his Yuanying clone had been killed in an instant. He could not help but be shocked and afraid. Seeing him retreat, Yu Yuji did not pay any attention to him. He stretched out his hand and pointed. The 5 inherited treasures in the air did not resist at all and fell into his body. As a cultivator of the Devil's Sect, Zhang Boyan was extremely familiar with the scene before him. At this moment, how could he not know that Yu Yuji's body had been taken by someone else? He was immediately shocked and angry. He shouted sternly, "Who are you?" Yu Yuji turned around. His eyes were faintly bright and deep like an abyss. His expression had a disdainful expression. He clasped his hands behind his back and said in a deep voice, "I, Tai Heng." Chapter 384. Even with Zhang Boyan's shrewdness, he was extremely shocked when he heard the words Tai Heng. He instinctively took a few steps back while his eyes were filled with disbelief, and he cried out involuntarily, How could this be possible?" But when he thought about it again, just now, Tai Heng had practically annihilated his Yuanying clone in an instant. Coupled with the imposing manner revealed by Tai Heng's words, it was indeed impossible to fake. So, he was instantly shocked. It wasn't just him, practically everyone in the inner hall had their eyes wide open, and they were shocked beyond words. A myriad of thoughts flashed through the minds of everyone. Old ancestor Tai Heng was a figure that ascended 10,000 years ago, so how could he be sealed here? Could this person be a fake? If his identity is real, then could it be that something unexpected happened all those years ago? Only Zhang Yan's spirits rose, and his eyes flickered brightly as he stared fixedly at Tai Heng. Amongst everyone here, only he knew about Tai Heng's background. Even though Tai Heng called himself Tai Heng, and they were related to old ancestor Tai Heng from all those years ago, they weren't the same. Today, he'd come under the orders of the sect master to annihilate Tai Heng. All those years ago, old ancestor Tai Heng's cultivation was almost perfect, but he was unable to break through the final layer. So, he'd come to ask the founding ancestor of Qinsang school, old ancestor Tai Ming. When old ancestor Tai Ming met him that day, old ancestor Tai Heng didn't say a word before he raised his sword and killed old ancestor Tai Heng, causing old ancestor Tai Heng to flee on the spot. After he returned to his abode, old ancestor Tai Heng was puzzled at first, but after he thought about it carefully, he finally came to a sudden understanding. He was a devil Wyrm that attained the Tao, so he'd entrusted his cultivation and the devil intent in his heart to his Wyrm's tail, and he'd resolutely slashed it down to put an end to his past. After that, he'd gone to the secret cave at the bottom of the sea and cultivated for over 1,000 years before finally attaining perfection. Before he ascended, he hadn't repaid old ancestor Tai Ming's guidance, so he'd personally gone to Qinsang school to thank old ancestor Tai Ming. However, the great underworld ancestral master had already ascended. Tai Heng Grand Elder could not help but feel very disappointed. In order to repay this karma, he predicted that there would be a devil's calamity in the Donghua continent in the future, so he suppressed his broken tail, which had already become a devil, under Yaoyin Mountain. He also passed down a lineage of orthodoxy and many magic treasures. He ordered his eldest disciple, Yi Jiuyang, to wait for him to ascend and open a sect here to guard it for 3,000 years. He could leave on his own and wait for the fated disciple of Qinsang school to pick it up in the future so that he could avoid the calamity. Ancestor Tai Heng was afraid that the Qinsang school wouldn't accept his goodwill, so he deliberately made it clear that the inheritance contained both the devil sect's cultivation technique and the Taoist sect's inheritance. If the devil sect obtained it, they would definitely rise to power. This was an overt plot. If Qinsang school didn't know about it, it wouldn't matter. But now that he knew about it, he couldn't just ignore it. Also, there were many secrets involved. Therefore, only the past sect masters of Qinsang school knew about this. This could also be considered a hidden move, so they couldn't make it public. That was why sect master Qin secretly ordered Zhang Yan to go kill the devil and obtain the 5 inherited artifacts to complete this karma. Of the 3 talismans given to Zhang Yan, one was the demon-slaying talisman, one was the protection talisman. One was the flying talisman. However, there were a few harsh conditions to use this talisman. The sect master also knew about it, so he explained it in the letter. If he failed to slay the devil, he could activate the remaining 2 talismans and escape in time. There was no need to force it. However, Zhang Yan also had his own plans. Ancestor Tai Heng's remnant devil soul had survived for 10,000 years by absorbing the blood essence of the flood dragon's tail. Although it was trapped for a long time and his strength was not as good as before, it was still the essence of ancestor Tai Heng's devil cultivation. If Zhang Yan could obtain it, he would definitely be able to greatly improve his divine contract. Although it was more difficult to achieve this step than slaying the devil, and he could die if he was not careful, this was a rare opportunity. No matter how dangerous it was, he had to give it a try. Old devil Zhang Boyan didn't know this person's background. Suddenly facing such a legendary almighty cultivator, the first thought in his mind was to escape. But in the next moment, he remembered that this place was a world of its own and the exit had long been sealed. There was nowhere to escape. Thinking of this, a fierce look appeared in his eyes. If that was the case, then he might as well fight to the death. So what if it was ancestor Tai Heng? It was just a life and death struggle. After all, he was a cultivator of the devil's sect who had roamed the world for many years. After the initial shock, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. After being imprisoned for nearly 10,000 years, even if he was an almighty cultivator, he should be exhausted and powerless at this moment. Moreover, if this person was really so powerful, why did he take advantage of the battle between him and Yu Yuji to seize his body? Couldn't he just directly kill him? The other party didn't have a physical body, so it was impossible for him to kill his Yuanian clone in an instant and try to restrain Yu Yuji's spirit at the same time. Once he calmed down, the more he thought about it, the more he understood the situation. In an instant, he guessed the matter. A cold smile appeared on his face. If it was him, he would have killed everyone here at the first moment, but the other party still hadn't made a move. At this moment, he must be strong on the outside but weak on the inside. He was just bluffing. Daoist Taiheng glanced at him and seemed to realize that his background had been seen through. He chuckled and said, "I'm afraid it's a little too late to realize it now." "It's not too late." Zhang Boyan let out a loud shout and leaped forward. His movement was grand and imposing, causing the entire hall to shake. Chilly winds and jade-green flames surged out. At the same time, he shouted, "I don't believe in heresy. How much of your strength can you recover in such a short period of time?" Taiheng smiled indifferently. He indeed hadn't recovered his strength, but just now, he could roughly refine this inheritance golden seal. This treasure could control the formation and restrictions of this place, so it was enough for him. He pointed his finger, and with a rumble, a formation door appeared out of thin air and blocked Zhang Boyan's path. With Zhang Boyan's eyesight, he could tell that this was a teleportation formation door with a single glance. If he accidentally bumped into it, he would be teleported to another place. He sneered in his heart. "You want to stop me with this formation door? You're underestimating me too much." He stopped moving and was about to destroy it. But right at this moment, Taiheng smiled faintly, and then he flicked his sleeve. The scripture scroll that Zhang Boyan had escaped just now swiftly flew up, and with a swish, it expanded to over 30 m in size and enveloped Zhang Boyan from behind. His actions, timing, speed, and entry point were all grasped perfectly, and he interfered when Zhang Boyan had already circulated his profound technique and was about to move. Zhang Boyan hadn't expected such a move, and he instantly fell into a dilemma. If he attacked the formation door, then it was very likely that he would be entangled by the scripture scroll that flew over from behind him. Regardless of whether the opponent was ancestor Taiheng or not, he was an old devil that had been imprisoned for almost 10,000 years. Even if he was restrained for a moment, who knew what kind of technique the old devil would use to deal with him? But if he wanted to avoid it, it was already impossible. At this moment, there was nowhere to go, and the only way was to be forced into the formation door. At this instant, he didn't have time to think any further. Under his extreme hesitation and depression, Zhang Boyan let out a loud cry of unwillingness in the end, and then he retracted his hand before charging forward and smashing his head into the formation door. Taiheng seemed to have expected this, and his expression was calm as he waved his hand, causing the formation door to close with a bang. In the blink of an eye, he'd teleported Zhang Boyan elsewhere. All the cultivators here were stunned. This self-proclaimed ancestor Taiheng practically didn't use any heaven-shaking and earth-shaking divine abilities, yet with just a few simple movements, he was able to force an expert of the devil's sect to have no choice but to follow his will. After he finished doing this, Taiheng had a carefree expression. This formation door had only teleported Zhang Boyan to the foot of the mountain, and if he wanted to come up again, he would have to fly along the mountain path. Even though it wouldn't take long, it was enough for him to buy this bit of time. In just a dozen or so breaths of time, he would be able to suppress Yu Yuji's soul with all his might and completely seize this body. At that time, even if Zhang Boyan came again, he would be at his mercy, and he wouldn't have to worry at all. After he dealt with all the troubles here and refined the golden seal, he would be able to completely grasp this small world in his palm. However, right at this moment, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he suddenly formed a seal. The sword in his hand swung out, and it transformed into a ray of sword light that flew up and slashed down towards Tai Heng. At the same time, he shouted, "This person is a 10,000-year-old devil, not ancestor Tai Heng. Everyone, quickly make a move." He'd already vaguely sensed Tai Heng's objective, and he had to stop him at this moment. Otherwise, if he allowed Tai Heng to completely take control of the situation, then it would truly be difficult to deal with him. He was a core formation realm cultivator, and under normal circumstances, if he didn't use his final trump card, he would be unable to resist Tai Heng at all. However, at this moment, he only needed to delay Tai Heng for a short period of time, and it would be enough. As soon as he made a move, the first to react was Xiaoqing Kong Tong. This person who called himself Tai Heng was originally sealed here, and he immediately seized Tai Heng's body. He was definitely not a righteous cultivator, and he was an enemy, not a friend. Thus, he didn't hesitate to attack as well. However, after the ray of sword light flew up, it arrived first even though it was launched later. In a flash, it had already arrived above Tai Heng. The second to act was the cultivator with the thin beard. How could he not be anxious when he saw his senior brother's body being taken? He pointed with his finger, and a golden cloud flew up with auspicious light surging within it, and it descended above Tai Heng. However, when facing such an old devil, there were only a few who had the courage to act at this moment. Besides Kong Tong and the cultivator with the thin beard, Fang Zhenlu, Zue Mo, and the others all had cautious expressions as they watched from the sidelines. Tai Heng was surprised at first, and then he felt admiration. He didn't think that there would be someone among the core formation cultivators here who could see through his plan. Most importantly, that person even dared to stop him. He smiled lightly, stretched out his hand, and pointed at the flying sword orb. A seal wrapped around it, and the sword orb trembled. Its spiritual light disappeared, and it fell to the ground like an ordinary object. In the blink of an eye, it was sealed. As for Zhang Yan's magic sword, he blocked it with the horsetail whisk in his hand, and it was instantly broken into countless pieces. Then, he waved his sleeve, and the golden cloud disappeared. In just an instant, he had resolved the attacks of the three people. It was as if killing them was as easy as flipping his palm. However, not only was Zhang Yan not dejected, he even smiled because he knew that after this short delay, the other party could no longer care about him. As expected, old ancestor Tai Heng frowned for the first time, and he turned his head to look outside. The eagle girl followed behind Ying Qinglin. Her large sleeves drooped down, and her entire body was covered in green clouds. She stepped into the hall with a solemn expression. Chapter 385. When Zhang Yan saw Ying Qinglin arrive, he could not help but smile. This person had come at the right time. Although Zhang Boyan had been teleported away by the formation door, how could he be willing to accept defeat? His real body was still confronting Ying Qinglin. As long as he withdrew his formation, the latter would definitely sense the strangeness in the inner hall and know that he had been deceived. Zhang Yan had shouted earlier and pointed out that Yu Yuji was not the real Yu Yuji, but the 10,000-year demon. That was intentional. It was for Ying Qinglin to hear. He believed that as spiritual master Yuanying, the other party would be able to deduce the general reason from a few words. After Ying Qinglin entered the hall, he stood 10 feet away from Tai Heng. He looked at him with a complicated gaze and let out a long sigh. "Fellow you didn't listen to me and opened the seal without permission. Now you've ended up like this. How pitiful and hateful." He had said this to himself and did not expect to get any response. However, at this moment, Yu Yuji's eyes revealed a struggling expression. Then, his body trembled and he gasped for breath. He actually said, "Fellow Ying, you're right. I regret not listening to what you said before." Ying Qinglin suddenly raised his head and looked over with a surprised expression. He moved forward a little and asked tentatively, Your fellow you?" Yu Yuji revealed a struggling expression on his face. He gritted his teeth and nodded. He said hatefully, "That's right. The old demon is still in my body. Just now, I'm barely able to suppress him. Please come forward and use a talisman to seal my cultivation so that he can't do evil. Qinglin moved, but he only took half a step forward before he stopped again. He frowned and a hesitant expression appeared on his face. At this moment, his old habit of being cautious appeared again. He could not help but have many questions in his mind. Yu Yuji was actually able to suppress the 10,000-year demon? Was this real or fake? Could it be that the old demon was deliberately tricking me to go there? Actually, Qinglin knew in his heart that the best thing to do right now was to disregard everything and kill Yu Yuji. Then, everything would be over. However, if it was only the two of them here, then it would be fine. However, there were also disciples from the other sects here. Once they attacked, no matter how reasonable they were, they would not be able to escape. In the future, the cultivators in the Huanjin temple who were on good terms with Yu Yuji would not let them off. It should be known that it wouldn't be long before he was reincarnated. If these people harbored hatred in their hearts, they only needed to do something to consign him to eternal damnation. When Yu Yu saw that he didn't move for a long time, he seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. His face was covered in sweat as he spoke with great difficulty. "Fellow Ing, I know you're apprehensive. How about this? Here is a golden seal. With it, you can control the Grand Protective Formation. I'll give it to you, and after you take it, open the sealing formation. Send everyone out with me, then send a talisman to ask for help from the masters. Then we can deal with this devil." When Qinglin heard this, his expression changed. There was a hint of eagerness and joy in his eyes. He said loudly, "That's right, fellow Yu's words are very reasonable. Quickly give me the golden seal. As long as I control the Grand Protective Formation, no matter how powerful that old demon is, he can't do anything to us." Seeing that he agreed, Yu Yuji nodded slightly. He nodded slightly and reached into his sleeves with trembling hands. However, his movements were extremely slow, and the muscles on his face were twitching non-stop, as if someone was trying to stop him with all their might. Everyone in the hall became nervous as they watched. So, he took out the golden seal bit by bit. Then, he suddenly swung his hand and threw it into the air. When Qinglin saw it clearly, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. This was indeed the golden seal of Ji Shu. However, at this moment, he was still very careful. He didn't go forward, but instead sent a green gas up, wanting to pull it over. However, just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a bone-chilling coldness coming from behind him, as if it wanted to freeze all the blood in his body. He couldn't help but frown and dodge to the side, avoiding a ghastly white bone sword. He said coldly, "Zhang Boyan, you really don't give up your evil intentions. Ing Daoren, don't even think about getting this thing." A wisp of faint yellow smoke flew in from outside the hall. As it approached, the figure gradually materialized and gradually appeared. First, it was the head, then the hands, and then the torso. Due to the speed at which it flew, the lower half of its body was still in the form of the smoke, tumbling and tumbling, but it had not condensed into a solid form. Underworld escape technique? Qinglin was also shocked. This Zhang Boyan had actually mastered such a strange and unfathomable escape technique. Just how many more tricks did he have up his sleeve? Zhang Boyan secretly cursed in his heart. Earlier, he had relied on this escape technique to arrive outside the hall. Originally, he wanted to watch the two of them fight and reap the benefits. Therefore, he hid to the side. He didn't expect Yu Yuji to throw the golden seal out, but he absolutely couldn't sit back and watch. Once the golden seal fell into Qinglin's hands, if he was allowed to control the entire mountain and the mountain protection formation, he would have an absolute advantage. He wouldn't be able to leave this place at all, so how could he survive at that time? Therefore, he had no choice but to jump out and fight with Yu Yuji. He didn't grab the golden seal immediately. Instead, he let out a loud shout, and the 4 magic treasures in his hands shot out at the same time. They emitted a treasure light that filled the sky, and he launched a fierce attack on Qinglin. He was very clear that if he didn't force the great enemy in front of him to retreat, it would be a fool's dream if he wanted to reach out and grab the golden seal. Ying Qinglin's face darkened. His shoulders trembled, and a Yuanying leaped out. In an instant, a green light surged out, and the profound scaled python, white crane, and ichthyosaur flew up and collided with him in an instant. As the two of them fought, astral energy shot out and clouds rolled. The hall shook, and everyone retreated. Yu Yuji stood there expressionlessly, quietly watching the golden seal fall to the ground with a pa-da sound. However, he didn't move at all, nor did he extend his hand to pick it up. Zhang Yan couldn't help but look at the golden seal on the ground, and clenched his fists. Among the 5 inherited artifacts of the Yaoyin clan, only this treasure was the most useful at the moment. No matter who took it, the great formation in the mountain would be under their control. Not only would they be able to enter and leave without any hindrance, they could also use the formation to trap everyone here. It wasn't easy to snatch the golden seal from the old devil's hands, but now was the best time to snatch it. However, just as he moved his feet, his body that was leaning forward immediately stopped. No. The old devil's actions just now. He clearly understood the changes in people's hearts and was used to manipulating the situation. How could he have made such a big mistake? While he hesitated, some people couldn't help but take action. He wasn't the only one who saw the value of the golden seal. The thin-bearded cultivator was the first to jump out. Without a sound, he reached out and made a grabbing motion. A wisp of smoke flew out, trying to grab the treasure. Zhang Boyan saw this from the corner of his eye. With an angry roar, he flicked his finger, and a jade flame flew out. Seeing this, Ying Qinglin hesitated for a moment. He was originally on the defensive, and his hands were a bit slower than usual, allowing the old monster to launch an attack. How powerful was the Yuanying cultivator's indignant attack? The thin-bearded cultivator thought that Zhang Boyan was being held back. He didn't have the time to worry about himself. However, he was wrong. The jade flame flew over and accurately landed on his hands. In the blink of an eye, both his arms were burned away. His face was deathly pale. He let out a miserable cry and retreated a few steps. After standing for a while, his entire body suddenly collapsed and scattered into a pile of dust. Although he was dead. However, there wasn't only one person who tried to snatch the seal. Just as the thin-bearded cultivator was about to step forward, Zhuo of Yuxiao School's eyes flashed with a hint of slyness. He deliberately slowed down a step and followed closely behind. Seeing that the thin-bearded cultivator was instantly killed, he wasn't shocked, but rather happy. At this moment, no one could stop him from taking the golden seal. Just as the wisp of smoke flew out from his hand and landed on the golden seal, a figure appeared outside the painting. He sneered and shook the jade mirror in his hand. A ray of light flew out, but he didn't look at the result and retracted his head. Zhang Boyan was ecstatic. Su Gongyuan. Well done. Zhuo had already calculated in his heart. Once he obtained the golden seal, he would take out his protective magic treasure and only hope that it would be able to stop Zhang Boyan for a moment. Then he could roughly refine this item and open the formation door. At that time, he would be in charge of everything here. However, when he was illuminated by the light of the mirror, his hopes for the middle stage of the heart realm were shattered. Caught off guard, the golden light hit his body and he felt as if he had been hit by a sledgehammer. Blood sprayed out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and he flew out like a broken cloth bag. However, even at this moment, he still wasn't willing to give up. He hardened his heart and bit the tip of his tongue, activating his blood essence. With a "ha" sound, he forcefully twisted his body in midair and reached out his hand to grab. The pill fiend flew out, wanting to grab the golden stamp. Zhang Boyan immediately wanted to attack again, but at this moment, Ying Qinglin felt a trace of guilt because the thin-bearded cultivator had died too miserably. Seeing that the old monster was distracted, he suddenly turned from defense to offense. Zhang Boyan was caught off guard and immediately became flustered. He had no time to pay attention to anything else. Now that things had reached this point, Zhuo suddenly felt a bit of hope. However, at this crucial moment, a wisp of white smoke flashed in front of his eyes. Under everyone's gaze, Fang Zhenlu leaped up and sent out a wisp of smoke. He was the first to take the golden seal on the ground. After obtaining it, he even had the leisure to smile at Zhuo. Seeing this, Zhuo's body suddenly trembled. In a moment of anger, he spat out another mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. His breath was weak and he was already half dead. Fang Zhenlu was overjoyed that he had successfully obtained the golden seal. However, he was still cautious and quickly retreated. At this time, Zhang Boyan finally caught his breath. He shook his sleeve and another green flame flew over. At the same time, he shouted angrily, "Junior, you dare to do this?" The old man surnamed Chen next to Fang Zhenlu calmly stepped forward and opened an umbrella to block in front of him. The green flame collided with the umbrella, but it scattered like sparks. Fang Zhenlu smiled contemptuously. He held the golden seal in his hand and was in high spirits. He immediately wanted to circulate his Xian technique to refine it. However, when the spiritual energy went inside, it disappeared without a trace. His expression suddenly changed and he exclaimed, "Seal?" He looked at his hand and suddenly seemed to think of something. He first looked at the dim sword ball that Kang Tong had landed on the ground, then he turned to look at the old monster Tai Heng who was standing to the side with extreme panic. Daoist Tai Heng had been silent all this time, but at this moment, he glanced at him. Fang Zhenlu was shocked. He didn't know when, but the brilliance that originally belonged to Yu Yuji in his eyes had disappeared. At this time, what replaced it was a bottomless but calm gaze. Daoist Tai Heng said indifferently, "Little fellow, I will leave this thing with you for now. I will come back to take it later." When Fang Zhenlu heard this, his face couldn't help but turn pale. Daoist Tai Heng took a step forward and looked at the two people in the field. As a great cultivator from 10,000 years ago, he also had a proud heart. At this moment, he had completely tamed this body and taken it for himself. Naturally, he no longer wanted to play any tricks. Instead, he wanted to use his power to suppress others. As he took a step forward, boundless confidence rose from his body. The aura that was naturally emitted from his body immediately infected everyone. If the aura from before was like an obscure and deep pool, then it was now like a mountain or an ocean that covered the heavens and earth. Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan also immediately felt it. They looked at each other and tacitly retreated dozens of feet away. One on the left and one on the right, they faintly faced Daoist Tai Heng. Their expressions were unprecedentedly solemn. Such a great demon should first be eliminated by joining hands, to be continued. Chapter 386. Tai Heng's remnant soul had been trapped for nearly 10,000 years. Just now, when he came out, he was actually extremely weak. After destroying Zhang Boyan's Yuanying clone, his vitality had been greatly depleted. But now, he had completely suppressed Yu Yuji's soul and could borrow his magic power and vitality. Now, he had a thorough understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of this body. He was not inferior to the original owner. However, there was one flaw. Due to the limitations of Yu Yuji's cultivation, he was still stuck in the Yuanying realm for a short period of time. If he could find a suitable cave to cultivate in and borrow the 5 inherited artifacts of the Yaoyin clan, he would be able to enter the heavenly abode realm in a few years. At that time, he would be able to move unhindered in the world and become a great figure of the Devil Tao. Although he was only a remnant soul of ancestor Tai Heng, 10,000 years ago, he had met countless powerful cultivators. His vision was immeasurable. Therefore, he believed that with his current cultivation, it was enough to deal with the two people in front of him. In a battle between cultivators, it wasn't just the cultivation base and magical treasures that determined who was superior. There was also the right time, the right place, the divine abilities, the Tao techniques, the foresight, and luck. Sometimes, victory or defeat was determined in an instant. Moreover, the magic power true seal he condensed when he formed his core was still deeply imprinted in his soul. As long as he had a body and magic power, he could use some of the magic power he knew in the past. Of course, he wasn't afraid of the two Yuanying cultivators working together to besiege him. Ying Qinglin saw Tai Heng's boundless confidence and knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. He frowned slightly and reminded the surrounding core formation cultivators, fellow Taoists, retreat further away. All of you, retreat further away. Don't get hurt by it. A battle between nascent soul cultivators was not something that core formation cultivators could interfere with. Those who had cultivated the protective treasure light only needed to summon it, and with the vast magic power, they would be able to force them away. However, just now, before anyone could do anything, Ancestor Tai Heng suddenly smiled and waved his sleeve. Spell scrolls filled the sky as they fluttered down. Golden light flickered as they fluttered chaotically throughout the entire hall. Unexpectedly, they swept towards everyone. Several of them flew towards Zhang Yan. He sensed that there was something unusual about these spell scrolls. His eyes flashed, but he didn't take them head-on. Instead, he retreated. However, this spell scroll was very strange. Although the speed at which it floated wasn't fast, it seemed to be able to see through people. No matter where he dodged, it followed him like a shadow, unable to shake him off. He thought for a moment and turned to look at the others. Everyone in the hall had no idea what it was. There must be a reason behind this old devil's actions. Thus, everyone took out their own treasures to block him. The Qin clan elder beside Fang Zhenlu immediately stepped forward and opened the treasured umbrella in his hand. However, after the golden talisman flew over, it actually soundlessly entered the umbrella, and it didn't move as he imagined at all. He couldn't help but be stunned. Seeing everyone like this, Zhang Yan thought for a moment, then calmly took out several talisman scrolls. With a flick of his hand, he caught them. Sure enough, as soon as the golden light hit the talisman, it broke apart and disappeared. He waved his sleeve and moved the talisman to the side. The spell scrolls they had encountered here were only the tip of the iceberg, and most of them were headed for Zhang Boyan and Ying Qinglin. Zhang Boyan saw the dazzling golden light. It covered the sky and seemed to be everywhere. He didn't know what the old devil was going to do, so he didn't dare to be careless. When he came here, he brought a total of 4 magic treasures, the cold crystal white bone sword, the yin-yang rings, the breath-concealing nail, and the dove face tablet. At this moment, he threw them into the air and blocked in front of him. For a moment, dozens of talisman scrolls entered and disappeared without a trace. He couldn't help but be startled, and his expression changed indeterminately while a great sense of alarm arose in his heart. He didn't believe that this old devil would do something useless. However, he silently inspected the 4 magic treasures, yet he really didn't notice anything unusual. Ying Qinglin had been dodging ceaselessly earlier as well, but when he saw that the talisman was like a maggot that couldn't be shaken off and followed him no matter where he went, he frowned and shouted. Then, he sent his nascent soul out of his head, and the profound scaled python on his body turned around to completely block the golden talismans that were fluttering towards him. Daoist Tai Heng let out a loud and clear laugh. With a loud bang, there was a burst of light, and a Yuanying jumped out of the door. This Yuanying stood in the air. It was 30 feet tall, like a flood dragon or a devil. Its skin was covered with golden scales, hard armor wrapped around its face, and devil flames covered its body. Its aura was like floating light, and the flames flowed like clouds. It was grand and majestic, and its momentum was terrifying. Ying Qinglin looked at the Yuanying's appearance, and his heart trembled. The aura around his body circulated, and he became even more vigilant. This Yuanying's appearance was the manifestation of the magic power true seal, in the soul through the essence and magic power. Every cultivator's magic power true seal was different, so after it was condensed, the Yuanying's appearance would be different as well. But if it was passed down from the same source, it would be more or less the same. For example, the Yuanying of Daoist Tai Heng was undoubtedly a great evil of the devil path. When Zhang Boyan saw this, he laughed wildly and slapped the back of his head. A yuanying that was as black as ink leaped out and swept away the devil chi. Then, it summoned the 4 magic treasures and spun in the air before descending towards Zhang Boyan. It actually took the initiative to launch an attack. Ying Qinglin was forced by the situation to not join forces with Zhang Boyan to fight the enemy. When he saw that Zhang Boyan had already made a move, he also made a move. With a shout, he made a hand seal. The white crane beside him flapped its wings and danced lightly like a flickering light. Its long beak had already pecked at Tai Heng's face. At the same time, the fish dragon beneath his feet scuttled up from below and attacked towards Tai Heng's legs. He was a careful and conservative person. Even though he had made a move, he didn't forget to urge the profound-scaled great python to circle around him to protect his body. When Daoist Tai Heng saw the two of them attacking him, he seemed to be inexplicably excited. He shouted loudly and the entire hall shook. Just now, he was as calm as still water. However, the moment the yuanying appeared, it was tyrannical and domineering. Its protective demonic smoke spewed out for 100 feet and it didn't care about the 4 magic treasures flying towards it at all. It stretched out its hand and blocked the white crane with one hand and stepped on the fish dragon with the other. It only took a moment to suppress the 2 objects. Ying Qinglin was shocked at first, but then he revealed a cold smile. These 2 objects were formed from the essence of the demon's soul and were comparable to magic treasures. Even if the opponent was a great devil from 10,000 years ago, it was still a stupid move to grab them with his bare hands. He made a hand seal. He activated the 2 objects again. Instantly, the white crane and the fish dragon struggled and their bodies swelled up. In the blink of an eye, they doubled in size. When Zhang Boyan saw that his 4 magic treasures were falling and the opponent only used the protective demonic flames to deal with them, his eyes became extremely fierce and he shouted, "I don't believe that you can block it." He became ruthless and poured all his mana into the 4 magic treasures. Even the 4 treasures started to buzz and tremble. Then, he pointed his finger and they all fell down. With a rumble, they collided with the protective demonic flames. However, at this moment, a strange scene appeared. The treasured umbrella in the hands of the Chen clan elder suddenly exploded without a sound. His face instantly turned pale and he staggered a few steps back. Not only him, but the magic treasures in everyone's hands also cracked. The magic treasures that they had worked so hard for were broken. For a moment, blood flowed from the corner of everyone's mouth and they looked dispirited. Zhang Yan looked to the side and saw that the talisman that he had just shot out also seemed to have suffered from some kind of attack. With a chi-la sound, they turned into pieces of paper and flew away. At the same time, the originally lively white crane, fish dragon, and profound-scaled great python all let out sorrowful cries. His body flickered in and out of existence, and he actually showed signs of collapsing. Ying Qinglin instantly turned pale with fright. For a moment, he couldn't care about anything else and hurriedly used a technique to summon them back. Then, he placed them back into his body along with the protective great python to nourish. However, when he examined them, his heart turned cold. The 3 soul essences were actually in tatters and were on the verge of collapse. With such heavy injuries, they couldn't be used in this battle anymore. As for Zhang Boyan, he wasn't much better off. He was also in terrible shape. A series of cracking sounds could be heard. He was incomparably shocked and furious as he looked at the cracks on the 4 magical treasures. He raised his head again. He raised his head and stared at old ancestor Tai Heng, gritting his teeth and saying, "Could this be a technique that uses other objects to substitute itself?" Tai Heng placed his hands behind his back and laughed loudly, "Fellow cultivator, you found out a bit too late. What he just used now was the object substitution technique. This technique could transfer the attacks of others onto other things. However, there were a few harsh conditions when using this technique. Especially when one had to first use a spell scroll on the object. If the other party was prepared, they just needed to use something to cover it and it would be useless. However, Tai Heng thought to himself that not many people had seen this technique 10,000 years ago. He didn't know if the two of them knew about it, so he sent it out to test it out. After testing it out and seeing that the two of them didn't know about it, he boldly used it. When this technique was used, it meant that everyone in the hall didn't hold back. How could their magic treasures not be damaged when facing it head-on? Especially those core transformation cultivators who were caught in the crossfire. It could be said that the more cautious they were, the greater their losses. Zhang Boyan's expression was extremely ugly. Ying Qinglin also frowned. Both of them were speechless. Originally, Tai Heng had borrowed Yu Yuji's body and didn't have many magic treasures on him. The 5 inherited treasures weren't something that could be refined in a short period of time, so he was at a disadvantage. However, in just one exchange, the 2 magic treasures and soul essences in their hands were destroyed. Their biggest advantage was lost in the blink of an eye. When they made their move earlier, Zhang Yan was also closely watching from the side. His eyes did not even blink. He had been observing to see if he could find a suitable opportunity to kill the old devil. However, even though Tai Heng was fighting with the 2 Yuanying cultivators, he didn't reveal any flaws. He couldn't help but think, no wonder the sect master's tone wasn't very strong in the letter. He clearly knows how difficult it is to deal with this old devil. Even with the talisman in hand, unless this person just stands there and doesn't move, as long as he releases his aura, he will be able to detect it and dodge it. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly raised his head, and his eyes flickered. If he really wanted to make a move, he would only have one chance, and it would depend on whether he could grasp it or not. If he failed, then he would die. While he was thinking, he suddenly sensed something being thrown at him. He raised his eyebrows and waved his sleeve. A fiend chi flew out and caught the object in the air. It spun around in front of him. What else could it be if it wasn't the golden seal of the pivot? Fang Zhenlu suddenly shouted at him. Fellow Taoist, among us, you're the only one who hasn't been injured. This thing is most suitable for you. Zhang Yan's gaze swept around. The people around him seemed to be afraid that he would send the golden seal over. Their expressions all changed and they all retreated, leaving a large empty space around him. Zhang Yan immediately knew what Fang Zhenlu was planning. However, while others were afraid of taking this hot potato, he wasn't afraid at all. He shouted, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." He generously waved his sleeve and put the golden seal into his palm. Chapter 387. The reason why Fang Zhenlu was willing to take out the golden seal was because after trying for a long time, he found that the seal on it didn't budge at all. Seeing that there was no hope of breaking the seal in a short period of time, he completely gave up on the idea. Realizing that it would be a disaster if he kept it in his hands, he panicked slightly and didn't want to keep it in his hands anymore. He was thinking about how to get rid of this disaster. When he threw it to Zhang Yan, it was just a test. He didn't expect Zhang Yan to accept it. When he saw Zhang Yan accept it without any hesitation, he was also startled. Then he was overjoyed and thought to himself, people say that a man's heart is insatiable, like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. I was thinking too much. There really are people here who aren't afraid of death. Seeing the golden seal fall into Zhang Yan's hands, the surrounding people avoided him as if they were avoiding a god of plague. They all looked at him with pity in their eyes. How could it be taken so easily? Once a core formation stage cultivator was involved in a battle between Yuanying cultivators, it was easy to say that his life was in danger. Especially when there were 2 devil path cultivators who were skilled in various soul refining techniques. Even if he died, he would probably suffer endless torture. With the golden seal in his hand, Zhang Yan secretly sent a wisp of spiritual energy into the seal. After circulating it a few times, he discovered that Patriarch Tai Heng had used some kind of exquisite technique to make the seal incredibly sturdy and unbreakable. He played with the golden seal for a while, and his eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. The most important thing to do now was to leave this place and find another place to try to refine the seal. If he could refine it even more lightly, he would be able to do so. He didn't need much. As long as he grasped the key formations of this mountain, no one here would be able to do anything to him. However, with the golden seal on him, he had become the focus of the scene, and he couldn't leave as he pleased. He needed a suitable opportunity to act. After making up his mind, he tossed the golden seal into his sleeve and didn't think too much about it. He just calmly looked at the scene. He waited for the opportunity to come. Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan's magic treasures were broken by Tai Heng in a single move, and their confidence was greatly damaged. This old devil's methods made them feel a deep sense of fear. However, even if they wanted to stop now, they couldn't. If the old devil had the upper hand, why would he let them live? Thinking of this, the two of them felt a sense of common hatred for the enemy. They pulled themselves together and stared solemnly at their greatest enemy. Just now, they were in a hurry to win, so they let the opponent take advantage of them. Now that they had calmed down, they immediately realized that they had made a mistake. This old fiend had attained the Tao 10,000 years ago, and his way of fighting formations was completely different from the cultivators of today. They could only deal with him with the methods they used against ordinary cultivators of the same generation. They thought that once they used their magic treasures, they would be able to win even if they couldn't take him down. Even if they couldn't take him, they still wouldn't lose. After Ying Qinglin woke up, reflecting on the painful experience, the wariness on his face increased. He pointed his finger, and a pen flew out. Riding on the astral cloud current, it lifted its body into the air. In a flash, he flew into the distance and faced old devil Tai Heng. This rock couldn't attack, but it was very fast. If it encountered any powerful attacks, it would be able to dodge in time. Right now, he was extremely afraid of the old monster. Thus, his attitude was to avoid making any mistakes, not to gain merit. Seeing Ying Qinglin's reaction, Zhang Boyan inwardly cursed, "Cowardly rat." However, after witnessing Patriarch Tai Heng's divine ability and Tao technique, Zhang Boyan didn't dare to underestimate him. However, he didn't dare to go all out and attack. Retreating a few steps, he rolled up his sleeves and used the Yellow Springs Escape technique. His entire body turned into a faint yellow smoke, and then a column of smoke rose up, rising higher and higher. When it reached the top of the hall, it circled around Tai Heng's hall a few times, as if it was looking for an opportunity to strike. Both of them had lost their protective treasures, so their offensive techniques had been weakened as well. So, they didn't dare be careless when dealing with Tai Heng. So, both of them utilized their movement techniques as they flew up with the intention of seeking victory before being defeated. Ancestor Tai Heng smiled faintly when he saw how cautious the two of them were. He tapped his finger, and the scripture on the ground swiftly flew up and unfurled. It didn't take long for it to transform into a long scroll that shone with the aura of treasures, and it revolved in front of him to protect him. Ying Qinglin's eyebrows twitched. He shook his hand and sent a bolt of lightning down. However, when it landed on the scroll, it only shook slightly. It didn't break. He sighed inwardly and smiled bitterly. Now that the two of them had lost their treasures, it was Daoist Tai Heng who had the treasures in his hands. The situation had been reversed in an instant, causing him to feel that his hands and feet were tied. After Tai Heng took out the scroll, his expression was calm, and he took out a foot-long talisman made of gold and iron from his sleeve. Although the talisman was quite inconspicuous, when Zhang Boyan saw it, his expression couldn't help but change, and he said angrily, "Demon sealing talisman?" The Inata temple was proficient in the demon sealing talisman, so it wasn't strange that Yu Yuji had this talisman. However, Tai Heng actually took it out at this moment. Could it be that he was proficient in the demon sealing talisman as well? Or was it just to mess up his mind? For a time, all kinds of thoughts came into his mind, and it added a bit of fear to him. He just hovered in the air and didn't dare to land. However, Patriarch Tai Heng didn't care what they were thinking. With a shout, he extended 2 fingers and pointed forward. Immediately, 4 clouds of black smoke descended from the heavens toward the two of them. With the experience just now, the two of them didn't dare to take it head-on in case they fell into a trap, so they both retreated. The 4 balls of black energy flew at a godly speed and chased after them. When they arrived in front of the two of them, they expanded outwards and actually emitted countless dazzling golden flames. They were like a myriad of candles that filled the sky as they rained down. When the two of them saw this, they quickly spread out their magic power, and each of them carried a green and a black ray of light. They turned them into clouds and sent them forward to block. However, when they came into contact with the golden light, they felt that the opponent's magic power was getting heavier and heavier. It was like a heavy burden was constantly pressing down on them. They immediately felt that something was wrong, and they quickly summoned their auras to resist it. But in this way, the battle had turned into a battle of mutual exhaustion. In a battle like this, you wear away a trace of my spiritual vigor, and I eat away a trace of your pill fiend. If both of them didn't have any tricks to win, one side's magic power would be completely exhausted. It would only end when one side was exhausted, and it all depended on who could hold on longer. Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan couldn't help but be surprised. The old monster had a magic treasure in his hand, and he clearly had the upper hand. He could have fought steadily, and then he would have a chance of winning. But why was he in such a hurry to compete with them? No matter how strong Tai Heng's magic power was, he was still borrowing Yu Yuji's body. How could his magic power compare to the two of them combined? But in view of the old monster's treacherous and changeable methods, they were very careful and secretly kept their guard up. The three of them were in a deadlock for a moment. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. At this moment, he knew that his chance to escape had come. He was a very decisive person, and once he made up his mind, he didn't think too much about other things. He waved his sleeves, turned into smoke, and flew out of the hall without hesitation. Even when Zhang Boyan was fighting with the old monster, he had been paying attention to the situation on both sides, afraid that the golden seal would make a mistake. Seeing that Zhang Yan was about to retreat with the treasure, he couldn't help but sneer. However, he was about to deal with Tai Heng, so he didn't have time to care, so he shouted in a deep voice, "Su Gongyuan, follow him." In his opinion, Su Gongyuan was a third-layer core transformation cultivator. People who had condensed magic power and true seals were also good at chasing and entangling. They also knew restrictions and formations. If they blocked a cultivator of the same generation, even if they couldn't win, they could make it so the other party couldn't escape. Therefore, he was very relieved. Compared to Zhang Boyan, Ying Qinlin's thoughts were much more complicated. He was afraid that the golden seal would be taken away by the other party's subordinates, but he also didn't want Zhang Yan to have some method to refine it. Therefore, after pondering for a while, his lips moved. The eagle girl standing at the side immediately sensed it, nodded at him, and immediately chased after him. Su Gongyuan was originally hiding far away from the battle. Now that he heard the call, he wasn't in a hurry to go forward, but first took a few glances. After confirming that only Zhang Yan came out, he felt quite confident, so he shouted, walked out in large strides, and blocked the way in front of the hall door. Then he flipped his hand, took out the jade mirror, and waved it at Zhang Yan. In an instant, a solid mirror light flew out. This mirror light just rushed out and seriously injured Zui Mo, so it was obviously a very powerful magic treasure. However, when Zhang Yan saw it, he didn't dodge. He suddenly shouted and went straight for the mirror light. There was a loud bang, and the mirror light was actually smashed into pieces by him. His momentum didn't change, and with a stomp of his feet, the bricks cracked, the wind blew, and the air within 3 feet swirled. Su Gongyuan was shocked. He did not expect Zhang Yan to be so valiant. Just as he was about to retreat, he shockingly discovered that his body seemed to have sunk into water, and it was difficult for him to move. He could not help but cry out involuntarily, "Your Li." Halfway through his words, a strong wind suddenly blew against his face. He hurriedly released all the Dan Qi in his body, trying to protect his body. At this time, Zhang Yan had already rushed in front of him. He opened his eyes and stretched out his hand. In a split second, he squeezed through the murderous aura and grabbed Su Gongyuan's throat. With a "hey" sound, he lifted both of his arms. Su Gongyuan suddenly felt the sky and earth spin. He realized that he was actually lifted above his head by his opponent. He couldn't help but scream in fear. A light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes, and with another shout, he heavily stomped on the ground. Bang! Smoke and dust flew everywhere, and the killing intent dispersed. Then, without looking at the person, he raised his foot, and with a crack, Su Gongyuan's sternum was completely broken, and he died without a sound. After stomping this person to death on the spot, Zhang Yan didn't even look at him. He used the force to jump into the air, and with his eyes looking forward, he used the minor heavens teleportation escape technique, and with a flash, his figure disappeared from the mountain ridge. From the time Zhang Yan fought with Su Gongyuan to the time he killed him, only a moment had passed. When the Eagle Maiden came out, she couldn't help but be dumbfounded when she saw the broken bones on the ground. Then, she looked at the empty mountain path and stood there for a long time, speechless. Zhang Yan flew along the mountain ridge all the way to the weapon refining pagoda where the Yaoyin clan stored the magic treasures. It didn't take long for him to arrive there. He stopped his ability, pressed down on the cloud, and drilled into the pagoda. Then, with another flick of his sleeve, the Devil Depository Pagoda flew out, and with a rumble, it landed in the hall on the first floor. He went up to open the door, entered, and soared to the fourth floor. He took a few steps forward, and with a turn of his hand, he instantly opened the pagoda's protective formation. Zhang Yan smiled slightly. With the protection of the Devil Depository Pagoda, even if the Yuanian cultivators came to attack, he wouldn't be afraid. Taking a few steps back, he spread out his big sleeves, sat on the praying mat, took out the golden seal, and began to refine the seal with all his strength. Chapter 388. Zhang Yan sat inside the demonic treasury and circulated his mana to try to refine the golden seal. But even after using several methods, he still couldn't break it. He pondered for a while and felt that the safest and most effective method was to use pure magic power to grind away all the seals and restrictive spells bit by bit. But even if this method could be done, it would probably take more than 10 days, and what he lacked the most right now was time. Ancestor Tai Hung was a 10,000-year-old demon with unfathomable strength. He didn't think that Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan could win. It probably wouldn't be long before they came after him. Moreover, the dozen or so strands of earth qi he had could only be stored for half a month. Naturally, the sooner he brought them back to the cave, the better. And there was another problem. Other than the seal on the seal, he needed time to refine it before he could master it. This wasn't something that could be done in one go. He wasn't as skilled as the old monster. Even if he refined it roughly, it would take at least half a day. In that case, he couldn't waste any more time. Luckily, before he left, he had already expected this situation. He calmly took out a talisman from his sleeve and smiled. I didn't think I would have to use it here first. This demon-slaying talisman was said to be able to eliminate all of Ancestor Tai Heng's mana. But the sect leader's letter warned that once this talisman was revealed, its qi would be like the rising sun, dyeing the heaven and earth, separating yin and yang. It was difficult for people not to notice it, so he had to be very careful when using it. But in Zhang Yan's opinion, no matter how powerful this talisman was, if it couldn't hit its target, it was as good as nothing. It was better to use it elsewhere. Holding the talisman in his hand, he slapped it without hesitation and pointed at the golden seal that was floating in the air. After 5 or 6 breaths of time, a magnificent golden light that forced him to close his eyes flew out and rushed toward the seal. After a while, the light gradually dissipated. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and took a look at the golden seal. He picked up the golden seal and took a look, and he couldn't help but smile. As expected, the seal on it had been completely broken. At the same time that he broke the seal, Tai Heng's eyelids twitched. He immediately noticed it, but his expression remained unchanged. He knew that the battle with Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan was the most important matter at hand, and he could only defeat the two of them. Only then could he think of the next step. Ying Qinglin, Zhang Boyan, and Tai Heng had been fighting head-on for so long. They saw that Tai Heng's magic power was getting thinner and thinner as time went on. It was obvious that he had consumed a lot of magic power. Although they did not understand what the other party was up to, the current situation could not be faked. At that moment, they desperately urged their magic power, wanting to crush the other party in one fell swoop. Patriarch Tai Heng's magic power was almost completely depleted. Even Yuanying had turned dim. There were only a few strands of demonic flames lingering around his body, but he didn't panic in the slightest. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, knowing that the time had come. He shouted in his heart. Suddenly, something crashed out from the manhole cover and fell toward the top of his head, then disappeared. Although it was only a glimpse, Zhang Boyan and Ying Qinglin clearly saw that it was a piece of bone about 5 feet long. They didn't know where it came from. It was a section of the flood dragon tail that Patriarch Tai Heng had cut off. The blood essence on it had mostly dissipated in the past 10,000 years in order to preserve the devil's soul. Now, only a little bit and this piece of tail bone were left. What Tai Heng was currently controlling was the Yuanying that Yu Yuji had cultivated for hundreds of years. Although it was infected by his magic power and true seal, it was still a profound Taoist technique. It wasn't condensed from a devil cultivation technique, so it couldn't unleash his full strength. As the saying went, without destruction, there can be no construction. He had deliberately exhausted his magic power, and then used the tail bone of the devil flood dragon to borrow the last few drops of blood essence to stimulate his magic power and completely turn into a devil. Once this Yuanying was condensed again, he would be able to use all kinds of devil cultivation techniques and devour and plunder. Before he destroyed everyone's magic treasures, he wouldn't have dared to do this, but now, he could do it boldly. The already weak Yuanying was nourished by the few drops of blood essence, and it became whole again. Gradually, a cloud of black qi wrapped around it. Everyone in the surroundings was able to sense that Tai Heng's originally weak aura was gradually becoming powerful, and it was growing stronger at all times. If he waited for the old monster to complete this step, wouldn't that be terrible? Wouldn't everyone here die a graveless death? Ying Qinglin and Zhang Boyan were both anxious, and they desperately increased their attacks. However, at this moment, the benefits of Tai Heng destroying their magic treasures could be seen. The two of them attacked repeatedly with their magic power, causing waves of multicolored light to appear, but they were still unable to break through Tai Heng's scripture of defense. They could only watch helplessly as the Yuanying was reformed. If it was at this moment in the past, he would have abandoned his enemy and fled when he saw the situation was bad. But where could he go in this miniature world? At this moment, he could only forcefully hold on. A moment later, the black qi that enveloped the Yuanying gradually dispersed. The hearts of everyone who saw the situation inside sank, and they were indescribably shocked. The Yuanying was originally half devil and half flood dragon, but its appearance had changed greatly now. A flood dragon of unknown length was floating in the air. Its body was coiled up, its sharp claws were clenched tightly, and its eyes were closed as if it was sleeping. Suddenly, the demon serpent's eyes widened, revealing a ferocious expression. A demonic aura suddenly leaked out, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. They were intimidated by the aura and involuntarily took a few steps back. Old Devil Tai Heng raised his head and waved his sleeve. The scripture around him flew up and instantly expanded to cover the entire inner hall. The golden pages and jade plates emitted endless light, as if they wanted to cover everyone. Zhang Boyan felt his scalp go numb. This was using a magic treasure to block everyone's path. This meant that the old devil was ready to pull in the net. He hurriedly formed a seal and activated the Yellow Springs escape technique, wanting to turn into smoke and escape. Just now, after escaping a few steps, he suddenly felt something strange behind him. When he turned around to look, he was shocked. He saw that the demon sealing token in Tai Heng's hand was actually flying towards him. He couldn't help but cry out in anger. He had no choice but to reform his body and use his magic power to send the token flying. But this token seemed to have locked onto him. Once he used the Yellow Springs escape art, it would immediately disappear. Once he used the Yellow Springs escape technique, it would chase after him again. After a few times, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. His escape technique could go into the sky and the earth, and it could also pass through the earth veins and the netherworld. This was the foundation of his invincibility when fighting with enemies. In this world, there were only a few magic treasures that could restrain it, and the demon sealing token of Huanjin Temple was one of them. However, if it was in normal times, he wouldn't be afraid. Even if he only had one magic treasure, he could block it. But now, all the magic treasures couldn't be used, so he was in a rather difficult situation. Old Devil Tai Hung was only using the demon sealing token to hold him back. His focus was on Ying Qinglin. The demon flood dragon rushed to the front of Ying Qinglin like a hungry demon. It bit here and there, but it didn't reject the spiritual qi currents formed by magic power. It didn't refuse and was swallowed in one gulp to replenish itself. This was a unique cultivation method that he himself comprehended after the demon flood dragon achieved Tao. As long as his magic power wasn't as strong as his, he could use this method to suck. Ying Qinglin saw that it was coming at him fiercely. His magic power was also much stronger than before. He felt that he couldn't fight it head-on anymore, so he used his strength to attack and force the demon flood dragon back a few steps. He ordered the peng under his feet to go somewhere else. He wanted to deal with it by moving around for a while. After he recovered some of his essence qi, he would turn around and deal with the old devil. However, the peng received the order and was about to flap its wings. The demon flood dragon suddenly let out a roar. Its body actually trembled and stiffened a bit, but it didn't escape. Ying Qinglin's heart skipped a beat and he thought, oh no. As expected, with this slight delay, the demon flood dragon circled around him and surrounded him. It moved its head and opened its mouth to bite down. Ying Qinglin quickly gathered his remaining magic power to defend against this unreasonable method. He sighed inwardly. The old devil's method seemed tyrannical, but if he was at his peak, he wouldn't be afraid. He only needed to restrain it from the front and order the fish dragon and white crane to attack from different directions. After all, the demon flood dragon wasn't as agile as the other two and couldn't just take a beating. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to maintain this unrestrained attack. However, the opponent managed to break these three soul essences in the first exchange, leaving him at his wit's end. He couldn't be blamed for this. A cultivator's magic treasures, cultivation techniques, and divine abilities had to be in perfect harmony with each other, allowing them to bring forth their greatest combat strength. If one of them was destroyed, it would be like losing a corner of a battle formation, and the strength would be greatly reduced. After Ying Qinglin was stuck in place, his face turned pale under Tai Heng's frenzied attacks. Soon, he couldn't hold on any longer. Yuanying's protective azure light was originally 10 feet wide, but now it was slowly retreating and was soon forced to a size of 10 feet. After the old monster swallowed his magic power, he became even more ferocious and insolent. After another moment, Ying Qinglin's Yuanying body flickered like a candle. When it was about to be extinguished, the demon flood dragon roared and swooped down, extinguishing the last bit of light. Then, it curled up and swallowed Ying Qinglin along with his Yuanying body. After eliminating Ying Qinglin, the demon flood dragon's fierce eyes shifted to Zhang Boyan. Zhang Boyan immediately felt the pressure on him increase. He knew that he was no match for this old devil. He couldn't help but ask with a guilty conscience, Senior Tai Heng, what do you want? Old Devil Tai Heng smiled faintly and said, if you know what's good for you, I won't kill you. With a point of his finger, the demon sealing token flew forward and stopped in front of Zhang Boyan. Zhang Boyan looked like he was struggling. He couldn't make up his mind. Tai Heng just looked at him calmly and didn't rush him. Even though Zhang Boyan was unwilling, at this moment, he had no other choice. He shouted, I am willing to submit to Senior. Finished speaking, he turned into smoke and flew into the demon's sealing token. Tai Heng waved his hand and grabbed the token. With a point of his finger, a faint golden talisman flashed and sealed the old devil inside. This time, he came out of the cage to take advantage of the rise of the demonic path to benefit himself. This Zhang Boyan was a demonic path cultivator and was of some use to him. Thus, he detained him first and wasn't in a hurry to kill him. As for the remaining core formation cultivators, he didn't even look at them. With a wave of his hand, the demon flood dragon flew out and devoured all the flesh and blood in its path. However, when it reached Fang Zhenlu's location, something happened. A magical talisman rose up and wrapped around him. Immediately after, a ray of light flashed and broke through the scroll's encirclement. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Ancestor Tai Heng exclaimed in surprise. He pondered for a moment. It seemed that such a miraculous life-saving treasure must have been refined by someone from the heavenly abode. Not to mention that it wouldn't be easy to find. Even if he obtained it, he wouldn't be able to use it in a short time. To deal with a mere core transformation cultivator, it wasn't worth it for him to mobilize such a large force. It wouldn't be a loss of status. Right now, the most important thing was to retrieve the golden seal. Everything else could be put aside for now. He took out a jade slip from Yu Yuji's sleeve and began to calculate Zhang Yan's position. With just a slight calculation, the jade slip shattered, and a few strands of white hair appeared on his temples. With a light snort, he put away the scripture talisman. A gust of strong wind blew from the ground as he headed straight for the pagoda. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 389. Not long after, Tai Heng flew to the top of the pagoda, parting the clouds and walking out, looking down. This Yaoyin mountain was the same as the outside world, day and night changed, day and night rotated. At this moment, it seemed to be dusk, the sky was bright red, incomparably magnificent, shining on the colorful tiles of the pagoda, making it shine brightly. After looking at it calmly for a while, he lowered his body, carrying a large mass of black qi, like a leaden cloud pressing down. He slowly came down, stopped in front of the pagoda for a while, then slowly floated in. As soon as he entered the main hall, he saw a 10-zhang tall pagoda towering in front of him, but the door was open. With a posture of inviting him to enter the urn, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He circled around the outside of the devil treasury, but still didn't enter. Seeing his cautiousness, Zhang Yan couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This old demon was indeed powerful, unexpectedly not willing to enter. If he entered the devil treasury, no matter how good this person's escape technique was, in the hall where there was no room for escape, as long as he closed the door and found an opportunity to slash with the North Dark Sword, he would most likely be unable to return. If it was any other Yuaniing cultivator here, he would definitely rush in without saying a word. But Tai Heng was different. In his lifetime of cultivation, he had seen too many tyrannical cultivators die from the schemes of juniors who were far inferior to them. Even facing a core transformation cultivator, he didn't have the slightest bit of contempt. Moreover, he didn't need to go in. He had a way to deal with Zhang Yan. There was no need for him to personally take the risk. Standing in place with his hands behind his back for a while, he let out a clear shout. A black cloud flew up. The demon flood dragon Yuanying flew out of the door. Because it had absorbed the essence and blood of many cultivators, the demon flood dragon's eyes were even more ferocious than before. The scales on its body were as black as ink, black and thick. After receiving the order to move, it twisted in the air, stirring up a gust of wind. It collided with the devil treasury. A loud rumbling sound was heard as layers of mysterious talisman markings floated up from the top of the devil trove. They flickered and flickered as if they were woven together. Ripples were formed as if a stone was thrown into the water. The ripples spread out from the point of impact and only disappeared after a while. The demonic flood dragon did not seem to give up. It charged forward again and again. From the looks of it, it seemed that he was determined to knock over the devil treasury. Zhang Yan's expression was natural. All he cared about was protecting the pivot and the formation. No matter how much power the formation exerted, it would not budge. Old Devil Tai Hung saw that he couldn't break the defensive formation, so he recalled Yuanying. His experience was incomparable to that of an ordinary person. With just a few probings, he could tell that if he didn't have a suitable magic treasure in hand, he wouldn't be able to escape. Even if he used all of his means, it would not be possible to break this restriction in 10 days. However, he was more concerned about something else. The person who owned this devil's treasury was definitely not a simple character. There must be some kind of trap set up. He smiled faintly. He reached into his sleeve and took out a few restriction plates. He walked slowly and circled around the devil treasury. After spending half an hour, he set up a sealing spell. This item was brought by Yu Yuji. It was originally used to seal and trap the demons. Right now, he didn't need to understand the method of subduing demons. He only needed to surround it a little and prevent Zhang Yan from escaping. That way, he could set up the trap calmly. He sat cross-legged in front of the devil treasury. He pointed his finger and a stone box flew out. He held it firmly in his hand. This stone box was one of the 5 inherited treasures of the Yaoyin clan. There were all kinds of magical weapons in it. There might even be a true weapon in it. With his magic power, even if he only took out one profound weapon, he would be able to refine it as he wished with just a little bit of refinement. At that time, he would be able to break this devil depository's defense formation and there would be no more problems. After he got rid of this layer of defense, he would be able to capture Zhang Yan with ease. It would take about 7 or 8 days to refine this box and the magical weapon. However, he didn't care. He didn't know what method the other party used to break the restriction, but if he wanted to refine the golden seal, there was no shortcut. With the cultivation of a core formation cultivator, no matter how strong his magic power was, it would take at least 10 days to refine it. Therefore, he had plenty of time to waste with the other party. When old Devil Tai Hung made this move, he was very open and didn't hide it at all. On one hand, it was because of his arrogance. On the other hand, he wanted to let Zhang Yan see clearly that even if he didn't come out obediently, the result was destined. Zhang Yan saw all of the old devil's actions clearly. Under normal circumstances, this arrangement would indeed be able to suppress him to the point where he had no way out. However, the other party didn't know that this devil treasury wasn't something that could be trapped by a few sealing formations. Since he was willing to confront him, he was happy to do so. He hurriedly took the opportunity to refine the golden seal. Old Devil Tai Hung waited for a moment. Seeing that there was no sound from the devil treasury, he wasn't disappointed. As long as he kept an eye on it, he wasn't afraid of the other party playing any tricks. After 3 days, under Zhang Yan's full refinement, his magic power had already penetrated a shallow layer into the golden seal. Right now, he could not say that he could control all of the great formations around the tower, but if he were to fly here, it would not be a problem. There was no need for him to fly along the mountain ridge. At this point, he had already gained the upper hand. Seeing that Tai Hung was still sitting at the entrance of the tower, he thought for a moment and activated the pivot. In an instant, the devil treasury let out an earth-shattering sound and disappeared from the ceiling formation, moving 1,000 feet away. When old Devil Tai Hung saw this, he couldn't help but frown. Looking at the restriction plate that was already useless, he slowly stood up. He didn't expect that the devil treasury could teleport through the void. This meant that Zhang Yan could leave and stay if he wanted to. This was a bit passive. The reason why Zhang Yan didn't hesitate to use the void teleportation technique was because he wanted to clearly tell Tai Hung that he could teleport to another location at any time. Even if Tai Hung wanted to capture him, he could only dream about it if he didn't enter the devil treasury. He wanted to force this old devil to come find him. Old Devil Tai Hung pondered for a moment and thought that even if this flying pavilion could teleport, it would definitely not go far due to the restriction of the mountain protection formation. Thus, he calmly waved his sleeve and circled around the mountain ridge. Because the devil treasury was only 1,000 feet away, it didn't take long for him to find it. Old Devil Tai Heng smiled. He had already roughly seen the teleportation distance of this item. To him, a radius of 3,000 feet was neither short nor long. If he had first occupied Yu Yuji's body, it would have been a bit troublesome for him. However, right now, he had already converted all of his cultivation into a devil path cultivation technique, and he had plenty of flying escape techniques. This distance could be reached in an instant. No matter where this person moved, he couldn't let the other party escape his line of sight. Thus, he sat in front of the flying pavilion and didn't go into the devil treasury at all. At this time, old ancestor Tai Heng displayed a patience that was completely inconsistent with his identity as a devil of a generation. He wasn't impatient, he was calm and steady. Zhang Yan couldn't help but admire him. The other party's cultivation had reached such a level. It was truly amazing that he could still hold on like this. He secretly thought that if he wanted to deal with a person like Tai Heng, ordinary schemes would probably not be effective at all. He could only use overt schemes to force him to submit. When he thought up to here, he suddenly felt that it was a great joy in his life to be able to meet such an expert of the devil Dao. His heart instantly surged with lofty sentiments, and he cupped his hands. He solemnly said, "Senior Tai Heng, this junior is Zhang Yan. Please excuse me for showing off my slight skill in front of an expert just now. Please excuse me." Old Devil Tai Heng saw that Zhang Yan had taken the initiative to speak, so he replied with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Zhang is polite. Your flying pavilion does have some skill, but you are a bit too eager. If you use this kind of teleportation method in a few days, you will definitely be able to catch I off guard." Zhang Yan secretly nodded. The other party was indeed worthy of being a devil path expert. The other party's bearing was extraordinary. He didn't hide anything that I might not have thought of. He smiled and said loudly, "Senior is right. I won't hide it from Senior. I have a supreme treasure that can be used against Senior. I originally wanted to lure Senior into the trap, but it seems that I can't do that now." Tai Heng wasn't surprised when he heard Zhang Yan say that he had a way to deal with him. He just smiled and said indifferently, "There are many things in this world that can deal with I, but none of them are truly effective." Zhang Yan also agreed with this. After watching the battle in the inner hall, he found that the demon-slaying talisman couldn't be used against this person at all. Even if it was powerful, what was the use? It was no different from a piece of waste paper. He smiled again and said, "Junior has other important matters to attend to, so I will stay here for at most 10 days. After refining the golden seal, I will open the array door and leave. If I still can't deal with Senior by then I will have to ask the masters of the sect to come and subdue the demons." Old ancestor Tai Heng's eyes flickered. This was the only thing he was worried about. The other party had the teleportation technique. After 7 or 8 days, as he refined the golden seal for a longer period of time, he could go to more and more places in this mountain. He didn't know how many times the other party's flying pavilion could teleport. If the other party could teleport a few times in a row, he could temporarily shake him off. Unless he had a technique to break the demonic treasury in one strike, it was very likely that the other party would be able to escape. He asked in a deep voice, "May I know which sect fellow Daoist Zhang is from?" Zhang Yan said solemnly, "I am a disciple of Qinsang School, ranked 9th among the top 10 disciples." Qinsang School. The orthodoxy passed down by the great underworld patriarch? Old ancestor Tai Heng couldn't help but be moved. If it was another sect's disciple, he wouldn't be like this. However, it was because Tai Heng had received the guidance of the Qinsang School's great underworld patriarch that he was able to get rid of the demonic thoughts and cut off the dragon's tail. Although he didn't know what happened later, he knew that it wasn't difficult to find a few people in Qinsang School who could deal with him. Zhang Yan continued, 10 days later, this junior will open the exit door 100 feet away and leave. If Senior wants to stop me, you can give it a try. Old Devil Tai Heng revealed a thoughtful expression. He didn't underestimate Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan must have something to rely on to be able to talk so confidently with him here and still be so calm and dared to make a move here. When the time came for him to leave, if he went forward to chase after him, the other party would probably use a method that could injure him. Old Devil Tai Hung wasn't an impulsive person. He wouldn't act rashly just because of a few words from Zhang Yan. However, if Zhang Yan really wanted to leave, he had a reason to stop him. Zhang Yan clearly stated his origin, which was to tell him that as long as he left the array door, there would be no way for him to live. Old Devil Tai Hung smiled indifferently. He had been unhindered in 9 regions for thousands of years, so how could he not even dare to take a move from a junior disciple? Then he replied, "All right, I'll give fellow Taoist 10 days. When the time comes, I will come here to meet you again." With a flick of his sleeve, he didn't stay any longer and flew away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chapter 390. Inside the Devil Treasury, Zhang Yan let out a long sigh. With a thought, the golden seal of Ji Shu that was floating in the air fell into his palm, and he held it tightly. After 9 days of time, he had already roughly refined this golden seal, and it was 1 day earlier than he had expected. If he was willing, he could already activate the formation door and leave this small world. However, his ultimate goal for coming here had not been achieved. Whether it was the sect leader's secret order or his own goal, he had to find a way to kill that old Devil Tai Hung before he could stop. Even though this action was a narrow escape for him, as long as he was able to accomplish it, he would definitely be able to improve his strength greatly by relying on the divine contract cultivation technique. That way, once the devil tribulation came, they would have some ability to protect themselves. How could he miss such an opportunity? No matter how great the risk, he had to give it a try. After quietly waiting for an entire night, dawn arrived. The first ray of morning light sprinkled onto the glazed tiles of the pagoda and the jade stone of the pagoda. The entire mountain was also slowly immersed in the brilliant golden glow. The vitality of the plants flourished. Another day had begun. Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and stood up. His eyes shone brightly, and there was a hint of determination and graveness in them. After standing there for a moment, he took out 2 talismans from his sleeve and looked at them before nodding slightly. Among the 3 talismans given to him by the sect leader, he had already used the exorcism talisman, leaving behind 2 talismans. One was a protective talisman, and the other was a flying talisman. It was precisely because he had these 2 talismans with him. Only then did he have the confidence to fight old ancestor Tai Hung with his life on the line. Otherwise, he might as well just leave this small world and not stay here any longer. He raised his hand with extreme caution and patted away the protective talisman. Immediately, a ray of light that was as clear as water rose from the broken talisman and wrapped him firmly like a cocoon. His whole body felt as if it was soaking in warm water, giving birth to a sense of warmth. After he was ready, a confident smile appeared on his face as he slowly walked out of the demon treasury. Without turning his head, he flicked his sleeves and the demon treasury was pulled up from the ground. With a spin in the air, it turned into energy and flew back into his sleeves. Zhang Yan leisurely walked out of the pagoda and looked around. The entire mountain was empty. As the birds flew away, they couldn't find ancestral patriarch Tai Hung. Although he could not see the other party, he knew that the other party was definitely nearby, watching his every move. As long as he could find a way out of the formation, he would be able to escape. They would definitely come out to stop him. He smiled and operated his magic power to turn the golden seal of Ji Shu. With a rumble, a tall decorated archway appeared 1,000 feet away. Almost at the same time the formation door was opened. He slapped away the escape talisman, and a ray of light shot out like a bolt of lightning. This time, by activating the flying escape talisman and the protection talisman, the 2 talisman had already used up all his trump cards. He wasn't so arrogant as to believe that he had 2 chances to kill this old demon. Therefore, he was staking everything on a single throw against himself. He didn't leave any leeway for his enemies. If he didn't force the other party into a corner, he wouldn't have a chance to attack. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Hung stood in the distance with a look of pity on his face. Since he knew that the other party might have a way to deal with him, the safest way was to kill him from afar. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng even took out a few magic treasures from the stone box. However, Zhang Yan didn't leave the slightest flaw in this place. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng had already imagined this situation. He was thinking that if Zhang Yan had some kind of magic treasure to protect himself, he wouldn't be able to break through it. Since he couldn't break through it, he might as well ignore it. As long as he was ahead of the others when the formation door opened, he would be able to rush out of this small world first. Once he was out of this small world, he would be able to see the sea and the sky. However, Zhang Yan's flying escape talisman killed this idea further. It was impossible for him to rush out first. In that case, the only way was to go forward and try to stop him. That would be the only way. These thoughts only flashed through Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng's mind for a moment before he laughed loudly. His body didn't move. The demonic Jiao Yuanying flew out of the door and turned into a streak of black light. He rushed out with all his might. He was determined to stop Zhang Yan. In an instant, the two streaks of light charged towards the formation door that was 300 meters away. They were like two meteors that were about to collide with each other. Zhang Yan suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng hadn't arrived yet, but his ferocious aura had already covered the heavens and earth, as if it could drown everything else. But he wasn't shocked, and he was delighted instead. His gaze stared fixedly at the figure that grew closer and closer, and he calmed his mind. Right at the instant the figure was about to touch him, the space between his brows twitched before a strand of violet-black brilliance suddenly appeared, and it carried a grand imposing aura that seemed capable of splitting the heavens and the earth apart as it soared through the sky. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng was shocked and sighed inwardly. However, when the sword light flew out, he knew that he couldn't block it at all. Even if he was in the elephant realm, he would have to retreat under this sword light. Not to mention that he was only in the Yuanying realm, and he couldn't avoid it at all. The sword light flashed like a bolt of lightning and cut the demonic Jiao in half in the blink of an eye. However, at this moment, a wisp of soul escaped from the Yuanying realm. With a twist, it avoided the sword light, and then it darted into the space between Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng's eyebrows. Zhang Yan's body couldn't help but tremble. As soon as he rushed into this body, Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng couldn't wait to rush into the sea of consciousness. He already had a plan in his mind. Even if he killed the Yuanying realm, he didn't need to worry about it. Zhang Yan's body had more potential than Yu Yuji's, and his lifespan was longer. Although his cultivation was slightly weaker, he could still cultivate back to his original strength after a few more days. However, he had used a secret technique of the devil path to break through Zhang Yan's protective talismans and the two doors on his treasured clothes. It wasn't without cost, and his soul would inevitably become much weaker. However, Zhang Yan was only a core formation cultivator and a member of the Celestial Sect, so how could he compete with him in this Tao? Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng entered the sea of consciousness in a flash. He looked up and saw that the sky was vast and the stars were dazzling. A young Taoist sat high up in the sky. When he saw Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng, the young Taoist stood up and smiled. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior Tai Heng, I've been waiting here for a long time." Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng frowned. He snorted coldly and said, deliberately mystifying things. With a shake of his body, he instantly grew 3,000 meters tall and transformed into a ferocious demon flood dragon. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws as he scuttled forward. Along with a boundless tide, he charged forward with the intention of devouring Zhang Yan's soul in one go. Zhang Yan laughed loudly, and a muddy yellow light rose from his body like a tall mountain. With just a single suppression, he managed to stop the flow of water outside of his body. Although he looked like he was resisting it with ease, he could feel that his soul was about to disperse under the pressure after being hit by the water. However, he forcefully blocked it with his incomparably firm Tao heart. Ancestral Patriarch Tai Heng was slightly surprised. He thought that he could easily defeat Zhang Yan. However, Zhang Yan's soul was far stronger than ordinary cultivators of the celestial sect. Although it was inferior to him, it wasn't something that could be taken down in an instant. His eyes revealed a ruthless and callous look. So what if I am? It was just a struggle before death. He said coldly, fellow Taoist Zhang, although your soul is firm and stable, it far surpasses ordinary people. You are far better than ordinary people, but I want to see how long you can last. He shouted, and his huge body trembled. Immediately, boundless demonic energy flew out and turned into black smoke and heavenly fire. The monstrous aura seemed to want to burn Zhang Yan to ashes in one breath. Zhang Yan looked at this shocking scene, but he was not afraid at all. He laughed loudly and said, Senior Tai Heng, I'm only fighting with my soul. I'm not fighting with Senior. Maybe I'll just have to ask for help. He waved his hand, and there was a clear sound of celestial music. A jade slip flew out of nowhere and turned into a jade-colored stream of light, arriving in front of Zhang Yan. The jade slip circled and floated above his head. Countless auspicious auras floated down. It was filled with clouds, golden light, auspicious clouds, and heavenly flowers. Not only that, no matter how the demonic energy moved, as soon as it touched the golden light, it would be absorbed into the jade slip. Then, it turned into streams of clear energy and poured into the top of Zhang Yan's head. Feeling the endless essence in his body nourishing his soul, Zhang Yan felt refreshed. He resisted the heavy pressure and slowly stood up. Then, his body shook, and in the blink of an eye, he became 10,000 zhang tall. He looked down and shouted, Tai Heng, today, this place will be the place where you bow your head. His voice rumbled and shook the surroundings. Old ancestor Tai Heng looked at the jade slip that seemed to be an immortal magic treasure, and he couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. The demonic energy and heavenly fire were formed from his own soul. Every bit he lost was a bit weaker, and he would never be able to replenish it in Zhang Yan's sea of consciousness. He instantly had a bad feeling. Zhang Yan actually had the help of such a magic treasure. Zhang Yan had clearly set up a trap for him to fall into. But now, he had no way out. He shouted in a low voice, and the sound of thunder instantly resounded. It seemed like the heavens and the earth were collapsing, and it actually stirred up an even more ferocious momentum than before. He suddenly charged over and bit down on Zhang Yan's shoulder. Actually, in such a cruel battle of souls, it was either you die or I die. There was no room for negotiation. Although Zhang Yan had made arrangements in advance, how could he allow such an old devil to fight in his body unless it was absolutely necessary? Even with the help of the jade slip, he wasn't confident in his victory. But at this point, both sides had no way out. They could only fight with their lives on the line. Zhang Yan snorted and reached out to grab the head of the demon Wyrm with one hand. His other hand grabbed the demon Wyrm's body, and with a loud roar, he tore the demon Wyrm in two. The demon Wyrm split apart, and in the blink of an eye, it gathered back into a ball and resumed its original appearance. It didn't stop and pounced forward again. The two of them rolled around and fought fiercely. Even though they knew that their souls were being continuously weakened by the jade slip, the old devil's attacks were like the tide, fierce and violent. He didn't show the slightest bit of fear or retreat. But after all, Zhang Yan had the help of the 9 captions devil-taming slip. As long as he didn't get taken down by the demon Wyrm in one go, he didn't have to worry about any losses. The more he fought, the stronger he became. In the end, old ancestor Tai Heng's soul was on the verge of dispersing, and he gradually couldn't hold on any longer. After an unknown period of time, when Zhang Yan tore the demon Wyrm's body apart again, he let out a deep sigh, and the demon Wyrm's body slowly dissipated. Zhang Yan's body trembled slightly. When he opened his eyes again, it was as if lightning had appeared in the void, and the demon Wyrm's body slowly dissipated. Zhang Yan's body trembled slightly. When he opened his eyes again, there seemed to be lightning in the void, shining brightly. He didn't know how much time had passed in his knowledge sea, but in fact, only a moment had passed in the outside world. He pondered for a moment, then flicked his sleeve and closed the array door. He stood up and turned around in the sky. Then, his eyes flashed, and he landed on the ground. In front of him, old ancestor Tai Hung was sitting cross-legged on the ground, holding a piece of broken bone in his hand. He was no longer breathing. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 391. Zhang Yan stood in front of old ancestor Tai Hung with his hands behind his back, watching calmly. This body was originally owned by Yu Yuji, and was later occupied by old ancestor Tai Hung, but the latter did not put much effort into it. In the Devil Dao, most of their magic power was merged into their primordial spirit, so that in times of danger, they could abandon their bodies and find another body to reside in. They did not place as much importance on their bodies as the disciples of the celestial sect of wonders. Therefore, when old devil Tai Hung turned into a demon, he only refined Yuanying once more. Even if he absorbed flesh and blood, he would only fill in the primordial spirit, and did not pay too much attention to this body. Zhang Yan slowly cast his gaze onto the broken bone. After the demonic dragon Yuanying was killed by the northern dark sword, it seemed to have been absorbed by this object again. There must be something strange about it. Because he had left early, he did not see what old devil Tai Hung had done in the Great Hall. However, he knew the roots of this old devil, so he had a rough guess of the origin of this object. Zhang Yan took a step forward, reached out, grabbed the broken bone, and picked it up. Just as he probed with his spiritual energy, he felt his arm tremble slightly. The profound energy within was like a tsunami, and it was extremely huge. Zhang Yan couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. When old ancestor Tai Hung cut off the flood dragon's tail, other than the remnant soul, there was also the devil path's essence energy that he had cultivated for thousands of years. However, since his body could not accept it, the devil's soul could not absorb it, so he had never touched it. Although more than half of it had been lost over the past 10,000 years, the remaining essence energy was all here. This was originally used by old devil Tai Hung to break through to the heavenly passage realm. However, he failed to possess Zhang Yan, so he also left it behind. Zhang Yan originally wanted to use the magic slip to absorb this item first, but after thinking about it, he felt that this item was extremely important to him, so he had to be careful. There was no need to be in a hurry right now, because he put the broken bone into his pocket and planned to deal with it after returning to the cave. He also checked Yu Yuji's personal belongings and saw that the 4 inherited weapons of the Yaoyin sect were all in his sleeve, not a single one was missing. He couldn't help but nod. However, in addition to that, he also discovered a demon sealing injunction. The talisman could vaguely see the handwriting on the seal. It seemed that the seal hadn't been there for a long time. Zhang Yan's gaze moved, he had already guessed who was sealed inside. However, this person's cultivation was also extremely powerful. Now, he didn't dare to remove the seal in vain, so he put it away. When there was nothing else important. With a thought, the 9 subjugation demon slip flew out from between his brows, circled in the air, and entered Yu Yuji's nose aperture. In just a few breaths' time, it devoured all of his flesh and blood. Then, with a clear sound, it returned to his body. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and the golden seal of Ji Shu flew out. He circulated his magic power and the golden seal trembled. A cloud flew out, and the scenery of the entire Yaoyin mountain appeared in front of him. His eyes were like torches as he observed the entire mountain, and he saw that in a palace. Fang Zhenlu was hiding in a corner, and his expression was rather disheveled. Zhang Yan thought for a while. The sect leader's orders were important. Moreover, he had already hidden his identity, so it wasn't convenient for him to meet him now. He might as well trap this person here first, and report to the sect leader before making arrangements. He activated the golden seal of Ji Shu, and a decorated archway appeared out of thin air. With a flick of his sleeve, he stepped out. After stepping out of the array door, he looked left and right, and saw that this place wasn't far from Qing Tong Mountain. There were still many streaks of light flying in the sky. However, when he opened the array door, the exit he chose was coincidentally hidden at the foot of the mountain, so no one noticed the commotion. After turning around and seeing that there was really no one around, he activated the golden seal of Ji Shu. With a slight movement, he moved the decorated archway away, and closed the mountain door tightly. Then, he activated a portion of the mountain guarding formation. The difference between having someone controlling the Grand Mountain guarding formation and having no one controlling it was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Not to mention that the entrance and exit of the formation were constantly changing under his control, even the mountain path was locked down. Without his permission, even a mighty cultivator would not be able to break in. After checking again and confirming that there were no omissions, he leaped up, riding on the sword light, and returned to Qinsang School with all his might. However, a sword light flashed across the sky, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. 3 days later, Zhang Yan returned to clear Nether Heavenly Lake. He didn't alarm the servant disciples in the sect, and opened the array door, and went straight into the 12-layered cave abode. He landed in the small pot mirror, and sat on the praying mat. The mirror spirit noticed the movement, and came out to greet him happily. She bowed and said, "Master is back." Zhang Yan smiled, took out the jade pots containing the earth spirits from his sleeve, and exhorted, "There are 16 10,000 years of earth spirits here, go and put them away." The mirror spirit's expression turned solemn. He stepped forward steadily and took it carefully. He thought for a while and said, "Master, Master Gui didn't cultivate the earth spirits at first, so there was no place to plant earth spirits in the manor. However, I can start now. It will only take half a day to build another manor under the heavenly lake for Master to plant earth spirits." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "It has been 13 days since the earth spirits were taken out. I'm afraid it will dissipate in a few days. You should be careful." The mirror spirit cupped his hands and said calmly, "Don't worry, Master. If it dissipates a little, I'll be responsible." Zhang Yan thought for a while, then he took out the broken bone of the demon flood dragon and said, "This thing is also crucial, but I'm going to visit the headmaster later. I'm afraid it's inappropriate to carry it with me. You put it away, and I'll ask you for it when I come back." The mirror spirit saw Zhang Yan's solemn tone, and she didn't dare to ask more questions. She also went forward to take it. Zhang Yan still had to go to the headmaster to report, so he didn't ask much about the affairs in the manor. He gave a few more orders and ordered the mirror spirit to leave. Then he took out the previous letter from the headmaster. His eyes moved down and stopped on the seal letter below. He made a gesture, and the letter trembled. A ray of light shrouded him, wrapped him up, and rushed out of the cave abode. It broke through the gang qi and went straight into the floating heavenly palace. When this golden light entered the heavenly palace, it seemed that it didn't want to alarm others. After a few twists and turns, it landed in a side hall. As the light dissipated, Zhang Yan's feet landed on the ground. He looked up and saw 2 red-crowned crane statues in front of the side hall. Smoke curled up from the incense burner. Footsteps sounded, and a delicate-looking Taoist boy came out. He cupped his hands and said, "Uncle Master Zhang, the headmaster knows you're coming, so he specially asked me to wait here. Please follow me into the hall." Zhang Yan nodded, stepped on the stone steps, and followed the boy into the hall. When he looked up, he saw Headmaster Qin sitting on the futon in the hall, holding a horsetail whisk with his eyes slightly closed. Behind him, there was a boundless Milky Way flowing. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and bowed, saying, "Disciple Zhang Yan greets the headmaster." Headmaster Qin opened his eyes and looked at Zhang Yan. He smiled warmly and said, "Zhang Yan, you're back. Did your trip go well?" Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "Headmaster, with the help of the 3 talismans, I didn't disappoint you." He took out the 5 inherited artifacts of the Yaoyin sect and told them about what had happened on this trip. Then, he made some modifications and told them about it. But sect leader Qin didn't even glance at those 5 legacy treasures. He just sighed. On this trip, in order to slay this 10,000-year-old demon, you sacrificed one of Master Uncle Darknortha's sword clones. The sect owes you a great deal, so we must make it up to you. He pointed with his finger, and a golden talisman flew over and burrowed into the heart of Zhang Yan's brows. He said, I now bestow upon you the seed of a true seal. Other than not passing it on to outsiders, it's up to you whether you use it or not. Zhang Yan was startled, and then he was overjoyed. The true seal he condensed was different from others. He couldn't follow the path of his predecessors, so he could only explore it himself. With the headmaster's true seal in hand, he could use it as a reference, and it would be much easier for him to deduce. He cupped his fists and said, Disciple thanks headmaster for bestowing the true seal. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and said, Senior apprentice brother Fang is still trapped in the small realm. Because of the urgency of the matter, Disciple was afraid that he would leak the small realm's secrets, so I didn't dare to let him out easily. Headmaster nodded and said, You handle this matter properly. This time, you're on my orders to conceal your identity and not to spread the news. After a few days, you'll take the golden seal and make another trip to find him. As for Hu Xian, I'll send an official decree to record your merit, so there's no need to say anything else. Zhang Yan made up his mind. He had originally gone to help Fang Zhenlu on this trip, but because he had a secret order with him, he did not reveal his true identity in front of Fang Zhenlu. Originally, it would be difficult for him to explain himself to Hu Xian, but with the sect leader's decree to cover for him, there was naturally no need for him to explain himself. Headmaster Qin looked at the 5 treasured instruments in Zhang Yan's hand, but he didn't take them back. He smiled and said, Since these 5 inherited Yaoyin clan now belong to my Qinsang school, we must choose a talent to pass it on to, and this matter still falls on you. Zhang Yan couldn't help but be surprised, and said, Disciple is a disciple of Qinsang school, how can I accept the Yaoyin clan's inheritance? Headmaster Qin smiled and said, I'm not asking you to change your sect. With your current cultivation, even if this small realm was given to you, you wouldn't be able to defend it. I'm saying this because there's another reason behind it. Zhang Yan said cautiously, Please enlighten me, Headmaster Zhenren. Headmaster Qin looked at him and said, The person who passed the sect to you is someone else, but this karma was settled by you, so that person's reincarnated body will have to enter your sect. Within 30 years, you must pay attention to a person with an eye between his brows. If you see him, you must bring him back to the sect. Zhang Yan thought that the advantages of this matter outweighed the disadvantages, so he nodded and agreed. He thought to himself, Since it's a reincarnated body, I wonder who was this person's previous self. Headmaster Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, You just have to pay attention to this matter, there's no rush. Before you left, I promised you that as long as you get rid of that old demon, you can choose another supernatural power to cultivate. There are 12 supernatural powers in the sect, if you like one, you can go to Jingluo Yard and look through it. If there's anything you don't understand, you can come to me to ask. When Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but feel happy. Passing down a supernatural power was a good thing, but to be able to receive personal guidance from the headmaster, what kind of opportunity was that? Meng, Zhu, Yan, and Sun, the 4 Taoist masters of Dongtian were all the headmaster's direct disciples, so it was clear that they were capable in teaching. Moreover, with this kindness of guidance, if anyone wanted to take advantage of him, they would have to think twice. He immediately bowed and thanked him. He could faintly feel that after he helped the headmaster with this matter, his attitude was much closer than before. Perhaps there was a deeper meaning behind this, but it was not something he could see through now. If you like this work, you are welcome to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 392. By the time Zhang Yan came out of the floating heavenly palace, it was already nighttime. He looked up and saw a sky full of stars, and a brilliant Milky Way stretched across the vast sky, hanging upside down. It was a magnificent sight. He looked up for a moment, and suddenly felt a sense of excitement, as if he was going to break through the sky and roam the 9 heavens. Just as he was about to get up and fly away, he heard someone behind him say, "Isn't that junior brother Zhang?" Zhang Yan looked back and saw a rather comical cultivator with a chubby face smiling at him. He also recognized this person, so he bowed and said, "So it's senior brother Miao." The person opposite him was Miao Kun, an in-name disciple of the sect leader. This person had once received orders from the sect leader to hide in the Su clan for more than 20 years. Later, in order to reward him, the sect leader not only accepted him as a disciple, but also bestowed Sui Hong's Immortal's Cave, Deep Stream 9 Winding Stream Palace, as his training ground. Miao Kun let out a hearty laugh and walked up. He first looked at the side palace, then looked at Zhang Yan, and asked, "Junior brother, are you here to see the sect leader's master?" Zhang Yan smiled and said frankly, "Yes." Miao Kun looked at Zhang Yan deeply. He knew that this side palace was not a place for idle people, unless they were someone the sect leader trusted, so he couldn't help but have a thought. His gaze shifted, and his laughter became louder. He said, "I didn't expect to meet junior brother Zhang here. Speaking of which, I've had some interactions with you since more than 20 years ago." Zhang Yan was surprised. He was a cultivator, and if he had met someone, he would never forget them. He thought about it and confirmed that he had never seen this person before. Miao Kun laughed. "That day when you went to the Shui country as an envoy, you were obstructed by that He Fang. After He Fang died, Sui Hong specially ordered me to hunt you down. However, I found an excuse later on, saying that I couldn't find you." Zhang Yan's expression changed, and he immediately deduced that this person was not lying. After he and Luo Shao killed He Fang, they were afraid that someone would come after them, so they were very careful on their way to the Shui nation. However, the strange thing was that no one came. He had thought that he had dodged the attack, but it turned out to be Sui Hong. It just so happened that he could entrust the task of chasing after him to this person. He immediately cupped his hands in greeting and said solemnly, "Then I really have to thank senior brother Miao." It's all right. It's just a small matter." Miao Kun waved his hand and said meaningfully, "Even if I were to come, junior brother Zhang would have a way to escape." The reason why he brought up this matter today was not to blackmail Zhang Yan, but to befriend Zhang Yan. Although he was the nominal disciple of the sect leader, he had infiltrated the Su clan for more than 20 years, and his foundation in the clan was not deep. His fellow disciples were the 4 Taoists of the heavenly abode. The difference in their cultivations was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. How could he dare to have any dealings with him? In the eyes of the other disciples, they were also respectful of his seniority. They were close to him but also distant. He looked impressive on the surface, but there were not many people he could befriend in the sect. The demonic tribulation was approaching. He was also guarding the Xinjiang stream by himself. Although he had taken in a few disciples, they were of no benefit to the overall situation, and he inevitably felt a little isolated and helpless. But Zhang Yan was different. He was a disciple of Zhou Chengju, and in a serious way, he were of the same generation. Zhang Yan's cave residence was in the clear nether heavenly lake. It was very close to his 9-twist stream palace. The strange thing was that the two people's positions in the clan were quite similar, and their cultivations were similar. If they could help each other, they could form a strong ally. Miao Kun stroked his fat belly and laughed. "I came here today because I had a few questions about cultivation. I wanted to ask for Master's help, but since the sect leader has seen junior brother Zhang today, he must have no time to see me. It's better to meet by chance than by invitation. If junior brother Zhang doesn't mind, why don't you come with me to the Xinjiang stream?" Zhang Yan wanted to decline, but Miao Kun insisted. It was difficult to refuse, so he said, "All right, let's go to senior brother's residence." Miao Kun couldn't help but be delighted. He activated the talisman with Zhang Yan and left the floating heavenly palace. Then, 2 rays of light flew out of the great lake of Dragon Abyss and headed north. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the Shinjin Stream Palace. This was the second time Zhang Yan had come here. Under Miao Kuan's guidance, they opened the protective formation and went to the main residence. The two of them arrived at the main hall and sat down. Then, two maids came up to serve tea. Zhang Yan carefully looked around and saw that the decorations were simple. Not to mention that it couldn't compare to the clear Serenity Lake, it was even a little shabby compared to ordinary cave residences. The Shinjin stream originally belonged to the Su clan. After it was attacked by the disciples of the sect, the cave residences were already in ruins. Bright pearls and decorations were hung in the residence, and the furnishings were either destroyed or moved away. The ones in front of him were redecorated by Miao Kuan. After all, his foundation in the sect was shallow, so it took him a lot of effort to decorate these things. Miao Kuan followed his gaze and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. "Junior brother, please don't mind my place." Zhang Yan smiled. "It's nothing. If senior brother doesn't mind, I can order someone to transfer some from the Leaping Heavens Pavilion." Zhang Yan was not only the master of the lower house, but also the master of the Leaping Heavens Pavilion. He was in charge of the allocation of cave residences for the true disciples, including the miscellaneous use. From his point of view, these were just some common things, so he might as well do him a favor. Miao Kuan's face lit up. "Then I won't refuse. To tell you the truth, this cave residence is too shabby, and I don't have the face to entertain guests." In his joy, he waved his sleeves and ordered the maids to bring up 2 jars of wine. He raised his cup and said, "This wine was the Su clan's collection in the past, and is very beneficial to cultivators. After the residence was destroyed, most of it was confiscated by the sect, but I kept some for myself. Junior brother, you must drink with me. We won't stop until we're drunk." Zhang Yan didn't stand on ceremony. He immediately raised his cup and drank with him. The two of them toasted each other and talked about some of the sect's secrets and interesting stories. Before they knew it, an hour had passed. This wine was indeed worthy of being the Su clan's collection. After drinking it, his inner qi surged and seemed to have improved a little. However, the after effects were too great. Zhang Yan was fine, but Miao Kuan was already a little drunk. Taking advantage of the drunkenness, Miao Kuan suddenly said, "Junior brother, do you know that in order to fight against the devil's doctrine, Huxian intends to support the 5 sects besides Qinsang school? When the devil's calamity comes, we can help our sect in the front, but the sect leader hasn't received a reply yet." When Zhang Yan heard this, his expression changed. The wine cup in his hand also paused, and his mind immediately began to plan. Huxian had spent a lot of time thinking about this. Now that he was one of the top 10 disciples, he was eager to expand his power. If he succeeded in supporting the sect, it could be said that he had a lot of cultivation resources in his hands, and he could give them to whoever he wanted. Moreover, he didn't need to do anything more. As long as he let out the news and gave a few small sects a taste of the benefits, many sects would come to him to curry favor. In this way, he would borrow the power of the sect, and imperceptibly raise his reputation. If he thought about it deeply, he was probably paving the way for the sword duel of the 16 sects. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Zhang Yan secretly thought that the North Star sect was not far from Qinsang school. Was it also in Huxian's plan? If that was the case, he couldn't let them interfere, but he had to hold it in his own hands. Thinking of this, he turned his head and said solemnly, "Senior brother, thank you for telling me about this." Miao Kuan's eyes were hazy from the alcohol, and he looked up blankly. "What did I say just now?" Seeing that he was deliberately pretending to be confused, Zhang Yan didn't mention it again. He smiled slightly and said, "Senior brother, it seems that you can't hold your liquor today, so I'll take my leave. In the future, please come to my residence as a guest, senior brother." Zhang Yan waved his hand, and immediately 2 maids came up and helped Miao Kuan in. After drinking the wine in the cup, his eyes flashed. He left the 9 Tunes Stream Palace alone, flew through the air, and returned to the clear nether heavenly lake. His sword escape was fast, and it didn't take long for him to return to the cave abode. After sitting down in the main residence, he called the mirror spirit and asked, "Have you made arrangements for the earth fiends?" The mirror spirit said, "Master, don't worry. The 16 earth fiends have all been planted, and none of them are missing." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "That's good. Other than that, is there anything else?" The mirror spirit said, "I was about to report to Master. Just now, a Taoist nun came, claiming to be under Zhong Muqing, one of the top 10 disciples. She came with a stone box." He raised his hands and handed over a stone box that was half a foot long. Zhang Yan took the stone box, opened it, and saw a talisman shining with golden light lying in it. He immediately knew that it was the seed of true seal that Zhong Muqing promised him. Zhang Yan closed the lid and said to the mirror spirit, "You can leave first." The mirror spirit bowed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Zhang Yan put the stone box aside, took out the remnant bone from Yaoyin Mountain, and placed it in front of the table. Then with a thought, the 9 captions demon vanquishing jade slip turned into a stream of light and flew out from between his eyebrows. The jade slip circled around the remnant bone, and as if it didn't know where to start, it flickered, turned into a mist, and sank down, wrapping around the remnant bone. The jade slip was connected with Zhang Yan's mind. He immediately noticed that it would take a year and a half for the jade slip to completely devour the remnant bone without losing any of it. Zhang Yan was also quite surprised. Even if the 9 captions demon vanquishing jade slip devoured the remains of Guai Songyao, it wouldn't take a long time. He didn't expect that old ancestor Tai Heng's remnant bone would take so much time. There was a strange look in his eyes, and he couldn't help but think, is this old ancestor Tai Heng some kind of ancient species? However, the more extraordinary this person's origin was, the more beneficial it would be to his Xian cultivation, so he was a bit looking forward to it. Since he couldn't refine it now, Zhang Yan turned his attention to the true seal seed in the stone box. With this seed and the one that sect leader Qin gave him, he now had a total of 2 true seal seeds in his hands. With these 2 true seal seeds, he could deduce and try to condense his own true seal. However, before that, there were still many things he had to do. Once the true seal was condensed, it would increase the level of the Tao techniques he knew, and when he used it, it would be even more powerful. Therefore, before passing this test, all cultivators would study their Tao techniques, so that when they condensed the true seal, they would be able to become even more profound. The higher the grade of the Dan, the more Tao techniques the true seal could contain, and the more power it could increase. Especially the Tao technique, it wasn't easy to cultivate. To reach the realm where one could use it as they wished, it would usually take dozens or hundreds of years. However, if one learned it before condensing the true seal and used it to improve the technique, then they wouldn't need to spend so much time cultivating it in the future. For example, Zhuangbu Fan had obtained the great overarching heavenly sleeve. The might of this divine ability was unbelievably great, but he had only cultivated it for 16 years before he was able to attain some accomplishments in it. Firstly, it was because the Kun Jade particle technique that he cultivated was compatible with this divine ability, and secondly, it was because when he condensed his true seal, he borrowed the enormous essence of a 3rd-grade core to improve this divine ability in one go. Those who had reached the upper 3 grades of Dan Qi had a vigorous Dan Qi, but the amount of Tao techniques they could imbue on the true seal was several times more than that of ordinary cultivators. Of course, there were also cultivators who focused on improving one Tao technique. This depended on the cultivator's decision. As for those cultivators who had yet to cultivate a superior technique before the 3rd level of the core transformation stage, even if they condensed a true seal, they would not be able to increase their strength by much. In the future, even if they had the opportunity to learn a divine ability, the time it would take would be several times longer than the previous cultivators. Zhang Yan's Dan had reached the 1st grade. It could be imagined that if he used the opportunity of condensing a true seal to improve his Tao technique, he would be far superior to his peers. Therefore, before that, he naturally had to learn those divine abilities one by one, but this way, it would take even longer. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.